Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are getting into something really special. It's a deep dive into what you might call technological time travel.
That's the perfect way to phrase it, actually.
Yeah.
We're looking at a pedal that's brand new, basically, the BiASS RE2 Space Echo.
Yeah.
But its soul, its entire reason for being, comes from a 50-year-old machine.
The legendary Roland RE201.
Exactly.
And when BiASS dropped the RE2 in 2022, they were pulling off what seems like an engineering magic trick.
It's a huge mission.
A colossal one. To take this massive, delicate, famously temperamental tape echo machine from 1974 and shrink it faithfully into one of their little pocket-sized pedals. This is so much more than just making another delay pedal.
Oh, completely. The challenge isn't just making a digital delay. I mean, that technology is, it's been around forever. It's mature. The real challenge is replication. The RE201 is famous for being imperfect.
Nonlinear, right.
Exactly. You're talking about the friction of the actual tape, the heat from the preamp, the little instabilities in the motor speed, and crucially, the physical spacing of its 3 playback heads. To replicate all that complex physical stuff digitally in a tiny box.
Yeah, that's got to take some serious processing power.
It demands the absolute pinnacle of what we call DSP, digital signal processing. It's pure modeling.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack the sources and figure out how exactly BiASS pulled this off. We want to go past the marketing points and really get into the how. How does this little pedal capture the real physical behavior of tape?
And how does it get those multi-head rhythms so right? The ones that are so iconic.
And maybe the biggest question of all, how does it recreate that famous gradual sonic thing that everyone calls the bloom?
We're digging into the architecture. Every little decision they made, from the algorithms they chose to how they mapped the knobs, it all had to serve one goal. If the RE2 doesn't feel and sound like a living, breathing, slightly moody tape machine from 1974, then the whole project is a failure.
Right. And we want to know what they built into this design that lets it do more than just be a standard sterile digital delay.
Exactly.
And, here's the core takeaway for you, the listener, right up front. Understanding this pedal means understanding that complex, beautiful analog sound. It's truly democratized now.
That's so true.
This is the most affordable, the most compact, and definitely the most reliable Space Echo experience that has ever been released.
You're taking away all the barriers. The $1,000 repair bills, hunting down fragile tape loops, the sheer size of the original units.
All of that is gone. This isn't just a convenience. It's a real technological achievement. It's the legend, just in a modern, usable format.
Yeah.
So let's start with the source, the legend itself. The Roland RE201 Space Echo. When that thing came out in 1974, what made it so special? Why did it become an icon?
Well, it was really a revolution in reliability, first and foremost, but combined with a sound that was just totally unique. Before the RE201, tape echoes they were notorious maintenance nightmares.
Right, you hear the horror stories.
Oh, yeah. They often use these clumsy spool-to-spool systems. So the tape was always getting tangled. It was a pain to load. The absolute genius of the 201 was its self-contained, continuously rotating tape loop. It was in its own little cartridge.
That cartridge design, that was the game changer then.
It was everything. It gave it so much more stability and, frankly, longevity than anything else in the market.
Yeah.
It meant the tape was always at the right tension, the right speed. It reduced failures and the need for constant tweaking dramatically.
Which means you could actually take it on the road.
Precisely. It made it usable on stage, in smaller studios. Other units were basically delicate studio installations. This thing was built to be used. And that, right there, secured its place in touring rigs everywhere.
But, reliability gets you in the door. The sound is what makes you a legend.
Absolutely. And the sound of the RE201 came from this powerful combination of 3 key things, all in one box.
Okay, what were they?
First, the multi-head delays. That's the rhythmic heart. Second, that really characteristic analog preamp. And third, the built-in spring reverb.
All 3 together.
Yeah. That combination created this complete 3-dimensional vintage soundscape. It was rhythmic, it was warm, and it was atmospheric all at once. No other echo machine could really touch it.
So let's bring it back to the modern tribute, the RE2. It's interesting where it sits in the BiASS lineup.
It is. It's part of their standard compact series.
Yeah.
You can tell by the model number, the size. It's a classic BOS pedal.
And it's not a Wazacraft pedal.
No, and that's a really subtle but important point. The Waza line is their premium, slightly bigger, more expensive stuff. By putting this in the standard line, BOSS was basically saying, we are so confident in our DSP that we can nail the full complexity of the space echo in our standard, affordable format. It's power for the people.
And when we describe the RE2 as a tape echo, multi-head delay, and spring reverb emulation, that almost sounds too simple. The sources make it clear they were modeling the entire machine, not just the sounds.
That's the leap, you see. It's the difference between emulation and deep simulation. Emulating a delay time is easy. Simulating the physics of a magnetic tape hitting a record head, then a playback head passing through an analog circuit. That's a whole different level.
So let's break down those specific elements, the RE2 models. This is like the anatomy of that vintage tone.
For sure.
Let's start with the rhythmic core, the multi-head tape delays.
Okay, so the original RE201 had one record head and then three separate playback heads. Let's call them H1, H2, and H3. And they were spaced at fixed physical distances from each other. You couldn't move them.
And that physical distance is what creates the timing.
Exactly. The distance from the record head to head 1 gives you your shortest delay time. Every other head's timing was just a fixed, unchangeable fraction of that distance. The RE2 captures those exact immutable intervals, and that fixed relationship is what creates those amazing, layered, syncopated rhythms. They sound so organic because they're musically related.
Okay, so once the signal hits the simulated tape, it has to get that RE201 sonic DNA, right?
Yes, and that signature warmth comes from two things working together. The tape itself, and just as important, the preamp coloration.
The preamp.
The analog preamp in the original 201 used these specific transistors that gave the signal this subtle, rich, low-mid harmonic thing, and it would gently roll off the high end. And this happened even when the echo was off.
Oh, wow. So it was an always-on kind of effect.
In a way, yes. And the RE2 models that specific coloration. If your simulated preamp is too clean, the repeats just sound separate from your original signal.
Yeah.
By modeling that circuit, the warmth is fused right into your core tone.
And then as the signal keeps looping around, you get into that beautiful imperfection, the gentle tape compression, and of course, wow, and flutter.
Right. Tape compression is so vital, it stops things from getting harsh. As the signal cycles and feeds back, especially when you crank the intensity knob, the simulated magnetic particles get saturated.
So it's like a soft compressor.
It's a very soft, nonlinear compression. It rounds off the sharp edges instead of just letting them clip digitally. So your tone gets denser and thicker, not just louder and more brittle.
And wow and flutter. I mean, that's the sound of life, isn't it? The sound of a machine actually working.
It is the sound of instability in the best possible way.
Wow.
Is the slower cyclical change in the motor speed. It gives you this gentle, long pitch bend, kind of like a subtle chorus or vibrato.
And
flutter is the faster, kind of choppier, higher frequency variation. And simulating this is absolutely essential.
Yeah.
So why vintage tape doesn't sound sterile?
it's proof of the mechanics.
Exactly. And RE2 gives you a dedicated knob for it, so you can creatively use that imperfection. Modern ambient and lo-fi producers, they love that.
And we can't forget the other part of the atmosphere, that classic, short, metallic spring reverb from the RE201.
Yeah, and that specific reverb is fundamental to the space echo name.
Yeah.
It is not designed to sound clean or pretty or ethereal.
Vibey.
It's super vibey. It's short, it's bright, it's metallic, it's splashy, and its high-frequency sizzle is a beautiful contrast to the dark, warm tape repeats. Modeling that specific character adds the final layer of vintage atmosphere.
So when you put all of that together, the fixed head rhythms, the preamp color, the soft compression, the modulation, that splashy reverb, they all add up to that one iconic behavior, the repeats that slowly bloom instead of just fading away.
The bloom is the signature. It's the thing, especially when you push the feedback. Most digital delays, if you crank the feedback, they either clip hard or they just run away into this horrible digital screech.
Right.
But the RE2, by modeling all that tape saturation and compression in the feedback loop, causes the repeats to gain harmonic complexity and volume gradually.
So they're feeding back into the warm preamp over and over.
Over and over. They get richer, they get denser. It's like a wave cresting. They bloom before they go into this full, very musical self-oscillation.
Okay, so let's get into the architecture. This is the part that really fascinates me. We know what it sounds like, but how did BOSS manage to distill this giant, complex analog machine into a standard little pedal? Let's talk about the engine room, the DSP modeling.
Well, the sheer amount of computing power needed here it's pretty staggering. This isn't just taking samples of the old machine. The sources are clear on this. It's using high-powered DSP to do a real-time simulation of complex, nonlinear physics.
So you're talking about modeling things like how the magnetism of the tape actually behaves.
Exactly. Things like magnetic hysteresis, which is the lag in magnetic response that causes saturation. You're simulating the friction and the drag of the tape motor in real time.
And they're not just modeling it as one big effect, right? They have to run separate algorithms for the different parts of the machine at the same time.
That's absolutely right. The simulation is component-based. So you've got three key things happening in parallel. First, the multi-head delay logic, which has to calculate the timing based on that simulated tape speed. Second, the really detailed spring reverb modeling.
Which has its own physics.
Totally. It's calculating the weird resonant frequencies of that specific tank. And third, the analog preamp coloration, which has to be applied at every single stage of the signal path. And all of those have to interact realistically, just like they did in 1974.
And this detailed algorithm, it wasn't built just for the RE2, was it? It has a lineage.
That's right. The core algorithms come directly from their flagship pedal, the BISS RE202.
The bigger dual foot switch one?
Yep. The RE2 uses that same foundational high-fidelity modeling, but it's been optimized and streamlined to fit into the smaller single-foot switch compact format.
So you're getting the same sonic quality as the Big Brother, just with a slightly more focused feature set.
Exactly. The core sound is identical.
Okay, so let's look at the interface. The control surface, the knobs, they're how we, the user, interact with all that simulated physics.
The controls are literally the instruction manual for the simulation. So let's take the repeat rate knob. On a normal digital delay, when you turn that, you're just adjusting a time parameter, milliseconds.
Simple enough.
But on the RE2, when you adjust the repeat rate, you're simulating a change in the tape motor speed.
So it's a physical simulation, and that has dual consequences, which is so key to the sound.
Precisely. So if you turn the repeat rate knob down really fast, which is like speeding up the motor, two things happen at once. The delay time gets shorter, and the pitch of the repeats you're hearing momentarily goes up.
Because the tape is running faster across the heads.
Exactly. And the opposite happens when you slow it down. The pitch drops and the time gets longer. That pitch shifting artifact when you mess with the rate knob is pure analog tape physics. It's a crucial part of the texture.
Okay, next up, intensity. This is your feedback control, but it's more than just counting repeats.
Intensity tells the simulation how much of the delayed signal to send back into that modeled preamp and compression stage to go around again. And the course is very clear that it's designed for self-oscillation.
This is the bloom control.
This is the bloom control. This is what lets you push the simulated tape into that nonlinear saturation and create that dense, rich feedback wash.
The echo knob is pretty straightforward, your mix level, but the tone knob is really interesting. It's a tilt EQ that only affects the repeats.
And that specificity is so important for the authentic sound. It lets you shape how the repeats decay, just like how real tape loses high frequencies with each pass. It's not a master EQ for the whole sound.
So you can make the repeats get darker and darker as they fade.
Perfectly. You can set the tone knob low for that super dark, warm decay. It's a classic dub texture where the echo has to kind of melt into the background. Or you can set it higher, and the repeats stay clear for longer, more rhythmic stuff. Mimics the sound of fresh tape.
And the final dedicated knob, the one that really dials in the imperfection. Wow and flutter.
This is maybe the most important control on the whole pedal for texture. It directly controls the amount of simulated motor speed and consistency. We can talk about how to use it later, but what it does fundamentally is decide how much musical chaos you want to inject into the timing and pitch of your repeats.
So it can go from just a little bit of movement to full-on psychedelic weirdness.
That's the spectrum, yeah.
Now let's get to the heart of the machine. The multi-head engine and that mode selector knob. This is where the famous rhythmic complexity comes from.
Right, so like we said, the original had one record head and three playback heads, H1, H2, H3, and they were physically bolted in place, so their timing relationship never changed.
They were mathematically related.
They were. If you call the shortest delay time the distance to H1t, then the distance to H2 was about 1.5t, and to H3 was roughly 2t. So you get these natural dotted eighth and quarter note relationships built right in.
So the 11 modes on the pedal are just different ways of combining those three fixed delays?
Exactly that. The mode selector just lets you turn on or off any combination of those three playback heads. The RE2 replicates those 11 possible combinations exactly, and that's where the magic is.
Give me a couple of examples of those combinations.
Okay, so you could select a single head mode, like just H1, for a simple slapback echo. Or you could select H1 and H3 at the same time.
So you get a short repeat and a long repeat together.
Right. You get this quick, complex, two-note rhythmic phrase. Or you can turn on all three, H1, H2, and H3, and you get this deeply layered, cascading, syncopated texture. That's a classic post-rock sound. And importantly, some of the modes are just echo, and others combine the echo with the reverb, so it's all integrated.
The fact that they stick to those 11 modes instead of offering, 99 random options is what forces you into the sound palettes that define genres like dub or krautrock.
It connects you, the modern musician, to the exact constraints that forced the innovation that created those musical eras. It's a commitment to the history of the sound.
Okay, let's just take a moment to appreciate the modern touches, BOSS included, because even though it's modeling a 1974 machine, the RE2 has some critical modern features.
Stereo outputs are a must-have in 2024, no question. Whether you're running a wet-dry rig or you just want those echoes to spread out in a mix, stereo is non-negotiable for modern work.
And I love how they included tap tempo without adding another foot switch.
That's just smart engineering, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The single foot switch does two jobs. You hold it to bypass the pedal, or you tap it twice quickly to set the tempo.
So you keep the small footprint, but you get that essential live feature.
Exactly. And you also get buffered bypass, which is standard for BISS. It keeps your signal strong and clear even when the pedal's off, which is vital if you have a big pedal board with long cables.
And there's that one hidden feature, the internal direct switch, the kill dry option. Why is that so important for advanced users?
Okay, so if you're a pro using a big switching system, or you're in a studio running effects in parallel on a mixing desk, you usually want to separate your dry signal from your wet signal.
You mix them together later.
Right. In that situation, you only want the effects loop to have the delay, the wet signal.
Mm-hmm.
If the pedal also sends your original dry guitar sound, you get phase problems and this weird weak mix.
Mm-hmm.
The direct switch lets you turn off the dry signal inside the pedal, making the RE2 a perfect pro-level studio insert effect. It shows they were thinking about high-end recording, not just guitarists.
All right, let's shift to the actual tonal experience. We've taken apart the architecture, but what does all that tech actually translate to sonically? What is the real difference between the tape echo sound from the RE2 and a standard, clean digital delay?
It's really the difference between sterile perfection and warm organic imperfection. The main characteristic is a lack of sharpness. The repeats are warm, they're rounded, and they have this gentle but very noticeable roll-off of the high frequencies as they decay. A clean digital delay just repeats perfectly until it vanishes. The RE2 models the degradation of the signal.
I love that concept from the source material, that the transients get smeared. It's such a physical way to describe a sound.
It's the perfect description, isn't it? And it comes from the physics of the magnetic medium. When a really sharp transient sound like a clean pick attack hits the simulated tape, the magnetic properties can't capture that attack perfectly and instantly.
It softens that initial edge.
It does. And since that happens every single time the sound passes the record head in the feedback loop, the whole texture of the repiece just gets smoother and more organic. It softens everything in a really musical way.
And that musical softening gets amplified by the saturation and the tape compression, especially as you turn up the intensity.
Oh yeah. When you push the signal level, the RE2 replicates that nonlinear distortion of analog tape. So instead of clipping, where the sound wave just gets brutally chopped off, tape saturation gently limits the peaks and compresses the signal. And that soft limiting is what lets the repeats get so dense and rich without ever sounding brittle or harsh. The sound gets muscular, not damaged.
Let's talk about that other essential sound source, the spring reverb. It can be a bit polarizing for people who aren't used to the space echo sound.
It's polarizing because it's authentic. The RE2 is modeling a specific spring tank from the 70s. It's meant to be short, metallic, super resonant, and vibey. I have to stress this. If you're looking for a giant, clean, cathedral-like modern reverb, this is not it. This reverb is designed to be a little gritty, a bit splashy. You can hear that sproing sound when you hit it hard.
So it serves a very specific aesthetic and function.
Exactly. A modern, clean reverb would sound completely out of place next to those dark, warm tape repeats. The metallic splash of this spring reverb actually cuts through the mix at a different frequency, giving you instant vintage atmosphere without clouding up the rhythmic delays.
It puts the space in space echo.
It really does.
Okay, let's go back to the wow and flutter control. This is the user's main tool for manipulating the texture and adding that intentional chaos. How do the settings translate into different musical sounds?
You can think of it as a spectrum. from just a little bit of gentle warmth all the way to complete sonic disintegration.
Okay.
So if you set it low, say around 9 o'clock, the wow and flutter gives you this really subtle tape warble, just a little bit of movement. It's almost imperceptible. This is perfect for sweetening up classic rock or blues, where you just want the repeat to feel slightly alive, a bit organic, not enough to be distracting.
But then as you start to crank it past noon,
That's where things get experimental. At high settings, you get these dramatic, deep, cyclical wobbles and detuning. The repeats become unstable, dark, really modulated. This is the signature sound of lo-fi production, of psychedelic rock, of ambient drone music. You're intentionally using that detune to make the soundscape feel like it's melting or a bit seasick. It's a delicious bit of sonic grit.
and that instability brings us back to that relationship between intensity and self-oscillation. We should really drill down on that unique blooming thing that happens when you push the feedback.
This is maybe the most important distinction between this and a standard digital delay. The RE2 lets you play the feedback loop. When you turn the intensity up, the sound doesn't just instantly peak and screech. Instead, the signal goes through that simulated tape compression over and over again. And with each cycle, it adds saturation and harmonic density before the volume really takes off.
That gradual nonlinear buildup is the whole essence of the space echo.
It is. It lets you control the swell with incredible precision. You can nudge the intensity up a little bit, create this ambient texture in the background that gets warmer and denser over a few seconds, and then just pull it back before it fully oscillates. It basically turns the pedal into its own evolving instrument. You're not just delaying your guitar anymore. The pedal is feeding its own rich texture back into the mix. It's essential for making those dense sound art loops and atmospheric drones. And, if we zoom out and look at the historical context, the RE201 wasn't just another popular effect. It was genuinely foundational. Its sound is stamped all over specific eras of music.
Yeah, when you look at the list of artists in the sources, Pink Floyd, U2, Radiohead, Brian Eno, Johnny Marr, Tame Impala, you see this clear thread. It's artists who are obsessed with space, atmosphere, and complex rhythm.
That's the common link. For an ambient pioneer like Brian Eno, the space echo was a texture generator. He'd use the long repeats and crank the flutter to make these washed-out cinematic soundscapes. But for someone like the Edge from U2, it was all about those fixed, mathematically related head spacings. He used the specific rhythmic combinations of H1, H2, and H3 to build his signature syncopated delay patterns. The delay became a secondary rhythmic instrument interlocking with the drums.
And it wasn't just specific artists. The machine literally provided the sonic backbone for entire genres that are built on atmosphere and density.
Oh, absolutely. Think about dub and reggae. The whole production style is based on pushing a delay into that creamy, saturated feedback and then using the spring reverb for those sudden metallic splashes of space.
Shoegaze, too.
Shoegaze relied on the RE201's ability to smear the transients and layer up these warm repeats into a cohesive wall of sound. And trip-hop, lo-fi, even today, producers use that analog warmth and intentional instability, the wow and flutter, to give their digital tracks an organic retro feel. The RE2 is a direct pipeline to all of those sonic blueprints.
So if you, the listener, get an RE2, how do you really maximize it in a modern setup? How do you move beyond just standard guitar delay?
Its versatility is its greatest strength. Yes, it's brilliant for those U2-style rhythmic patterns or post-rock textures, but it's also a superb recording tool for pretty much any source. And the key is that modeled preamp.
Okay, so how does that preamp help something that isn't a guitar, like a digital synth?
Well, digital synths, especially older software synths or sterile hardware, can often sound a bit too sharp. Maybe they lack a bit of low-end warmth. If you run them through the RE2's modeled preamp and into the tape simulation, you instantly get that beautiful, subtle compression and harmonic softening. It just takes the digital edge off and gives the synth this vintage, huge presence. Sounds like it was recorded on expensive analog gear.
And I can imagine the uses for vocals and rhythm tracks are enormous.
Huge. For vocals, in a genre like trip-hop or ambient, using long repeats with high flutter settings can create these warped, spectral, almost eerie textures. It pushes the voice back into the mix, making it part of the atmosphere. And for drum machines, if you run a simple, clean beat through the multi-head engine, it turns it into this complex, bouncing, syncopated loop. It gives the rhythm this immediate, organic groove that you just don't get from a perfectly quantized digital loop.
Even for something like bass guitar.
Absolutely. That nonlinear saturation is fantastic on bass. It adds warmth and grit and harmonics without losing the low-end definition, which a lot of aggressive distortion pedals do. It helps the bass sit in a dense mix beautifully.
Okay, let's wrap the section up with some practical considerations for anyone looking to get an RE2. What are the undeniable pros, and what are the trade-offs you have to accept for this compact design? Let's start with the pros.
The pros are all about fidelity and practicality. You get an incredibly faithful model of the RE201. It's quiet, it's reliable, and it's in a tiny footprint. The interface is simple, but it's deeply versatile. And you get the whole vintage package. The built-in spring reverb, stereo outs, tap tempo on the foot switch, and that very pro kill-dry option. It is, without a doubt, the cheapest and easiest way to get the authentic Space Echo sound.
It really is a modern solution that gets rid of all the vintage headaches, but, no design is perfect, especially when you're shrinking something down. What are the key limitations?
The first one is a result of its simplicity. No presets. The bigger RE202 lets you store and recall your settings. On the compact RE2, you have to dial everything in by hand.
So if you need to switch between very different sounds in the middle of a song live, that could be tricky.
Yeah, you'd have to bend down and twist knobs, which is a drawback for a really structured show.
Second, the delay times are locked into the physics of the original machine.
That's the price you pay for authenticity. The RE2 is modeling the finite tape loop length of the 201. You can't get infinitely long delays or super short, precise digital delays that were outside what the original 1974 machine could do. You're committing to that timing spectrum.
And third, the physical limitation of having just one foot switch.
It limits what you can do in real time compared to bigger units. You get tap tempo with a double press, which is great, but you can't, for instance, engage cap tempo and a hold or oscillation function at the same time. If you're a player who really uses effects as a live instrument, you have to be a bit strategic about it.
And finally, we have to mention the spring reverb one last time.
It's vintage gritty. It's short. It's metallic. If you want lush, pristine, modern hall ambience, you will need another reverb pedal. The spring reverb in the RE2 is a character piece. It's there to complement the tape engine and its specific sonic era. So when you look back at everything we've talked about in this deep dive, the main conclusion has to be the RE2's achievement in synthesis. They successfully took this entire chaotic, complex world of analog physics, the fixed multi-head logic, the nonlinear saturation, the wow and flutter, and they delivered it in a highly reliable, robust, and sonically authentic little box.
It's the ultimate shortcut to owning and using vintage sonic expertise.
It really is.
It's an incredible piece of engineering and a real testament to the timeless power of that classic sound. Bozes didn't just make a digital delay, they reverse engineered a piece of history.
And, this leads us to the final thought, the provocation I want to leave you with. It's all about this fundamental tension between technological power and artistic constraint.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
The original Roland RE201 was so successful precisely because of its physical limitations. The fixed head spacing, the maximum tape loop length, that inherent preamp color. These weren't features, they were just physics. There were constraints that forced musicians to be creative within a specific palette and that defined entire musical eras.
Right, they had to work within those guardrails.
Exactly. Now today, with DSP modeling, engineers can simulate anything. We could design a Space Echo with infinite head space however we want, with zero wow and flutter, a perfectly clean preamp.
The possibilities are endless.
They are. And yet the most successful and celebrated modern model, the RE2, dedicates its entire architecture to faithfully, painstakingly recreating the exact restrictions of the 1974 original.
So the question is, why?
Why do modern engineers and musicians still gravitate toward models that so perfectly replicate the limitations of the past? What does that tell us about the connection between creative constraint and musical identity? The fact that the RE2's success is based on how well it models the restrictions of the 201. It suggests that sometimes the boundaries of the past are actually the most fertile ground for defining the sound of the future.
A profound thought. Are we more creative when we're constrained? Something to think about the next time you dial in a little bit of wow and flutter.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us into the world of tape echo and modern modeling. We'll see you next time. If you listen to enough music from, say, the 1970s, I'm thinking dub, reggae, psychedelic rock, you start to hear this signature sound.
Oh, yeah.
It's this warm, kind of broken, tape-aged echo.
That's the Roland RE201 Space Echo. It's legendary, but the reality of it.
The reality was a nightmare. If you wanted that sound, you needed this huge, fragile vintage machine that demanded constant maintenance. You were literally feeding it loops of magnetic tape.
They were amazing, but completely impractical for the average musician on the road.
And that impracticality, it just created this huge sonic gap for decades, really. Musicians were desperate for that specific character, that warmth, but they needed something reliable.
Which is what makes our topic today so fascinating. How Bias, which is Roland's sister company, decided to tackle this problem. This was back in 2007 with the RE20, the twin pedal space echo.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive today into the Bios Air E20, a pedal that, really feels like a landmark. It was basically the first time that legendary complex sound was successfully put into a modern stomp box.
Precisely. And our mission here is to analyze how they pulled it off. We need to understand the breakthrough, how they used what was, pretty early digital modeling
Right.
to define this really distinct tonal character, a character that still sets it apart, even from its successors. And we want to look at why this specific pedal became a foundation for basically all modern delay technology.
Before the RE20 showed up, your options for that multi-head echo sound were pretty slim.
Yeah, what were you going to do?
You're either hunting for a working vintage unit, which was a gamble, dealing with these huge, expensive rack units, or saving up for some boutique clone that cost a fortune. It was not a sound for the masses.
And the RE20 just completely changed that landscape. It made true multi-head tape echo accessible. It made it practical for a normal pedal board. But it wasn't enough to just simulate a delay. They had to capture the three core things that musicians loved about the original.
Okay, so what were those three non-negotiables?
First, the warmth, the way the repeats degrade, but in a really musical way. Second, that organic modulation, the subtle wobble we call wow and flutter that makes it feel alive.
And the third has to be the feedback.
Right, absolutely. That famous musical self-oscillation, that runaway feedback. If the RE20 didn't deliver on those three things, it would have been a failure.
It also has this huge historical significance for Bias themselves. I mean, now they have the little RE2, the big RE202.
Yeah.
But the RE20 was the test case. It laid all the groundwork.
It really did. It proved that players would actually embrace a digital version of a beloved analog machine. And you have to remember, we're talking about replacing a physical mechanical process, tape wearing out, motors changing speed.
All that beautiful chaos.
Exactly, replacing it with solid-state digital circuitry. And back in 2007, the skepticism around digital modeling was still pretty high.
That's a great point. So how did they overcome that? What were players worried about?
Well, the skepticism was all about fidelity. Players just didn't believe digital could capture the nonlinear booty of tape saturation or the randomness of wow and flutter.
So how did the RE20 win them over?
Because Bias didn't try to make a perfect, clean digital copy. They leaned into their CUSO-SM modeling technology, that's composite object sound modeling, to replicate the imperfections of the machine, not just the delay time.
Okay, so let's dive into that tech.
Yeah.
The core of this thing is that early gen Roland Coco SM modeling.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't just making a delay, they were simulating an entire electromechanical system.
They were, and this is where they really earned their stripes. They digitally replicated all the messy, charming bits, the friction of the tape, the specific sound of the three playback heads, and of course, the key ingredient, tape saturation.
And for anyone listening who might not know, tape saturation is that subtle distortion that happens when the tape just can't handle any more signal. It's what makes everything sound warm and kind of glues it together.
Exactly. And the CUSO-SM engine had to model that, plus the pitch variation of wow and flutter, and this is a big one, the very specific sound of the original spring reverb cank. That is a lot to cram into one pedal.
And beyond the modeling, just the architecture itself is pretty forward-thinking. It had mono in, but stereo out, which is huge for modern players.
It is, and they made the controls so hands-on, no menu diving. You feel like you're actually using the vintage machine.
Let's walk through those controls, because that's really how you interact with this virtual machine. You've got the main echo section, starting with repeat rate,
which is your delay time or your virtual tape speed. And crucially, when you turn this knob, the pitch of the repeats swoops up and down, just like the original. You can play it like an instrument.
Then you have intensity.
Yeah.
That's the feedback, right? How much of the signal gets sent back through.
And once you turn that knob past noon, you are inviting that classic self-oscillation. And then, you've got your standard echo volume to mix it in.
But the tone shaping is key here, and often gets overlooked. You get dedicated bass and treble knobs.
And this is so important. They only affect the repeats, not your dry guitar sound. So you can dial in these super dark, murky echoes or bright, splashy ones. It adds so much texture.
And then rounding it out, there's a dedicated reverb volume for that modeled spring sound.
But maybe the most important control on the whole pedal is that big mode selector knob. That's the key to the multi-head patterns.
Tell us about those modes. The original had physical tape heads you could combine, right?
Exactly. And the RE20 gives you 11 modes that replicate those combinations. So you get single head slapbacks, dual head rhythmic patterns, all three heads at once. Each one has a totally different rhythmic feel. It's essential for stuff like dub music.
And for playing live, you have the foot switches. Left is on-off, and the right is tap tempo. Super useful.
But here's the feature that really elevates it. The expression pedal input. This turns it from a static effect into a real performance instrument.
So what can you control with the expression pedal?
You can assign it to repeat rate, intensity, echo volume, or reverb volume. So you can imagine using your foot to sweep the delay time for those crazy pitch bends, or pushing the feedback right to the edge of chaos during a solo and then pulling it back.
Wow, yeah.
That ability to manipulate it on the fly is what made it a staple for ambient and experimental players.
That really bridges the gap between digital convenience and that tactile, playable feel of the original machine. Which brings us to the core of it, the actual tonal feel.
This sound is it's so different from a modern high-definition delay. The RE20 sound is all about those analog imperfections it models so well. The repeats are warm, they're rounded, and they have the slightly darkened decay. The attack of each echo is softened, so it never sounds harsh or digital.
So this is where that paradox comes in. If you compare the RE20 to its newer, technically superior siblings like the RE202, what's the big difference you hear?
The distinguishing character of the RE20 is its graininess. It has this thicker, maybe less refined mid-range, and it just feels more lo-fi. And that slight digital grit, that's a byproduct of the early COSM tech. Yeah. And many players will argue that it actually sounds more like a real worn-out vintage machine than the super clean high-def models that came later. It's like the technological imperfection is the secret ingredient.
So this slightly older, less perfect algorithm became the desired sound. A happy accident.
It really is. And speaking of signatures, the self-oscillation on this thing is just legendary.
Why is that?
Because it's predictable chaos. When you push the intensity, the feedback is gradual, it swells, it doesn't just instantly scream at you like some digital delays do. It feels musical as it runs away.
And the fact that you can twist the repeat rate knob while it's doing that.
That's the key. You can steer the noise. You're playing the feedback like it's a synthesizer. That made it absolutely essential for dub producers, where the delay is basically the lead instrument.
And what about that spring reverb? That's always so hard to get right.
They went for vintage character, which was the right move. It's splashy, it's metallic, it sounds like a real spring. You can hear the sprowing. It's not a lush, modern reverb. It's there to complement the echo, just like on the original machine. Use it subtly.
Okay, let's talk use cases, because this pedal is way more than just a guitar echo.
Oh, it's all over the map. For classic echo, it's a must-have for rockabilly slapback, surf guitar, blues, and definitely psychedelic rock where you need those rhythmic pulses.
But I feel like its real strength is in creating textures.
For ambient and shoegaze, absolutely. The multi-head modes and the stereo output are incredible. You can build these huge evolving soundscapes, and the subtle tape warble from the wow and flutter adds this organic movement.
And going back to the source, dub and reggae have such a specific rhythmic relationship with delay.
They do, and the 11 head combinations are perfect for that. You can ride the feedback in real time to create those siren effects and deep washes that define the genre, and you can do it all night without your tape loop breaking.
The sources also mentioned a lot of studio use, not just on pedal boards.
For sure. The stereo out was a huge plus. Producers used it on everything, not just guitars. You could run a synth pad, a drum machine, even vocals through it to get that warmth and tape compression.
So it's almost like a texture box,
Yeah.
adding that analog weight to digital sounds.
Precisely. It was a quick way to get a classic vocal slapback or add life to electronic drums. And the tap tempo was great in the studio for locking in with the track.
So when you add all that up, what's its enduring legacy? Why is this 2007 pedal still so important?
It was the bridge. It single-handedly revived mainstream interest in tape echo and moved it from the expensive boutique world onto regular pedal boards. It influenced a whole generation of ambient and experimental players who suddenly had access to these sounds.
It really did become the gold standard on pro boards for years. It proved that digital could capture the soul of a fragile analog machine.
Yeah, it set the bar for every delay that came after it. It's fair to call it the space echo that started it all for pedals.
So before we wrap up, let's do a quick balanced view. The pros are obvious. First successful pedal version, authentic feel, musical feedback, tap tempo, stereo out, built like a tank.
Right. And the considerations, they really just show its age. There's no preset storage, which is a big one for live players. The reverb is just that one spring sound, and it has a pretty big footprint.
And what about the modeling itself? The wow and flutter is fixed.
Right, it is, yeah. That means the amount of pitch wobble is baked in. You can't dial it up or down like on newer pedals. That contributes to its unique character, but it's less flexible. And of course, that older COSM modeling gives it that grainier tone, which might not be for everyone.
But even with those trade-offs, that specific tone keeps the demand super high on the used market.
It does. For a lot of players, that specific digital graininess is absolutely worth it.
So the BiSS RE20 Space Echo, it remains a classic, an influential, and a really expressive delay pedal, celebrated for its warm, grainy, and just incredibly musical character.
And that leads us back to our final thought for you to chew on today. The RE20 got its famous analog warmth from what was, early digital tech that's arguably inferior to what we have now.
Right.
This older modeling resulted in a sound that's more lo-fi, more grainy than its successors. So we have to wonder, when you're trying to translate these classic analog tones, is technological imperfection, that slight graininess of older modeling, is that actually the secret ingredient to capturing the original charming organic warmth? Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are strapping in for a really high-fidelity look at a machine that's so much more than just a stomp box.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, your sources are calling it an evolved instrument, which is a pretty bold claim. We're diving deep into the Roland RE202 Space Echo.
The 2022 release, yeah, this is the big one, the flagship in their multi-switch series.
And it feels like the engineering challenge here was just immense.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about what they were trying to do. They weren't just making a delay pedal. They were trying to recreate the very specific, very complex magic of the original 1974 Roland RE201.
Which was a physical, mechanical thing.
Exactly, an electromechanical device. Its sound came from, physical stuff, the friction of the tape running over the heads, the heat from the motor, the weird things that happen as components get old.
And those little flaws, those imperfections, that's what became the sound, right? That's what people loved.
That's the whole ballgame. The original RE201 was never pristine. It was warm, it was thick, and it was unstable, but in this really beautiful musical way.
So the mission for the RE202 wasn't just to copy the sound of the Echoes.
No, not at all. It was to model and then perfect, and then actually expand on those very flaws.
Yeah.
The degradation, the tape saturation, the wow and flutter, all of it, but for a modern musician.
And looking through the sources, I mean, it seems like they didn't just meet that challenge, they kind of blew right past it.
They really did.
That description, evolved instrument, it feels right because this isn't just emulation anymore. It's like they took everything they've learned over decades and poured it into this ultra high-res modern processor.
Right. So just to be clear for you, the listener, about what this thing actually is, it's a really sophisticated processor that's doing several things at once.
Yeah.
It's a multi-head tape echo, it's a spring reverb, and it's a preamp emulator. And crucially, it's all running in true stereo.
And the core claim, the one we're really going to test as we go through this, is that this is the most advanced, most detailed, most feature-complete digital version of an RE201 ever made.
Period.
And when you look at the features, it's all about utility, isn't it? It's not just nostalgia. It gives you that perfectly modeled tape sound, but then it adds things the original could only dream of.
Like what?
Well, the delay times are way longer. It's true stereo, which is huge. The modulation controls are way more advanced. And this is critical. They completely rebuilt that classic Space Echo preamp system, which, as we'll get into, is like half the tone.
And you can't overlook the modern stuff, the things you just need now. Preset storage is a big one.
Of course.
And having 3 different reverb modes, not just the original spring. These are things studio users and live performers just expect now. It wasn't possible back then.
So the big takeaway, the aha moment right at the start, is that this thing is the ultimate evolution of that legacy. They had the original blueprints, they measured actual analog units.
Right. And that's the key. They didn't just listen to the old ones. They mathematically reverse engineered the physics of how the machine actually behaved.
That's the distinction, isn't it? Modeling the physics, not just the sound that comes out at the end.
Exactly.
And that's where this deep dive gets really technical and where all the incredible detail is. So let's get into the anatomy of this emulation, because that's really the foundation of why it sounds the way it does.
Okay, so let's pop the hood on this thing. The reason the RE202 sounds so authentic is all down to its DSP engine. It's described as an ultra-high-resolution engine.
Right.
And that's not just marketing speak. It's critical. It's not just running a simple delay algorithm where the repeats fade out. It's running a constant physics simulation of all these electromechanical parts interacting.
Okay, so when we say ultra high resolution, what does that actually mean for the sound we hear? How is it different from, say, the older RE20 pedal, which was also really good?
It means the chip has enough processing power, enough headroom to model all these different interactions and nonlinear behaviors at the same time.
Non-linearities.
Yeah.
You mean the unpredictable stuff.
The unpredictable but musical stuff, yeah. And the key concept here is independent modeling. Simpler digital emulations might just try to model the final audio output, maybe with a few filters. The RE202 models all the system components separately and then lets them interact dynamically, just like they would in the real world.
Okay, so let's drill down on that. What are these components that are being modeled independently? What does that actually do to the sound?
Well, they modeled every single physical part that makes a sound. So first you've got the 4 heads, there's the 1 record head, and the 3 separate playback heads.
And they're all modeled as individual things.
All modeled separately.
Yeah.
And the sonic implication of that is huge. In a real Vintig unit, each one of those playback heads would color the sound a tiny bit differently, depending on its physical alignment or wear and tear.
I see.
By modeling them independently, the RE202 can perfectly simulate those subtle phase issues and the stereo imaging that you get from the physical spacing of the heads. You just can't get that complexity if you model them all as one block.
So you're not just getting 3 delays, you're getting 3 distinct, slightly imperfect virtual playback systems all running at once.
Precisely. And then they modeled the mechanical tape transport itself.
The actual movement of the tape.
Yeah, the physics of it,
Yeah.
the wobble, the friction, the tiny variations in speed. That's what feeds into the wow and flutter modulation, which we'll get to, but it means when you turn the repeat rate knob, you're not just changing the delay time.
You're hearing all the other stuff that goes along with changing the tape speed.
The dynamic shifts, the subtle pitch bending, just like the real thing.
That sounds like a massive amount of processing power is needed for that.
It is a ton.
Yeah.
And beyond the mechanics, they had to model the tape itself, how it saturates, how it responds to bias.
Tape saturation is that compression, that warmth, right?
Right, it's that glue that makes everything sound thick and cohesive. But the bias behavior is really interesting.
Okay, explain bias. You hear that term a lot with analog gear, but what does it mean for the sound of the RE202?
So tape bias was this high-frequency signal they applied during recording to get the tape to work better, basically. Better high-end, less distortion. But if the bias was a little bit off or the tape was getting old,
You'd get a different sound.
you'd get this really specific type of nonlinear compression and a darker, less predictable sound. The RE202 models that. It makes sure that the signal being recorded onto the virtual tape already has that vintage magnetic character baked in.
Wow. And then you add in the head spacing for the rhythms, the
Yeah.
other stuff.
The spring reverb tank, which is a nightmare to model because it's so chaotic, and that vintage preamp path.
We have to talk about the preamp.
We do. But the main point here is that this level of detail, this completeness, makes it the most comprehensive model of an RE201 ever done in hardware. It's an interactive system simulator. It's not just an audio effect.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. The preamp. So many players who use the original RE201 say they bought the thing just for the input stage.
Oh, 100%.
They'd run their guitar or synth through it with the echo turned all the way down just for the tone it added.
It's totally true. That RE201 had this very distinct transistor preamp that added a ton of color. People used it as a dirty boost, a tone shaper.
Yeah.
If the RE202 didn't get that part right, the whole thing would sound sterile, no matter how good the delay modeling was.
And the sources break down exactly what that emulation captures. They talk about harmonic sweetening, subtle grit, and that tape compression. When they say sweetening, are we talking about adding those subtle upper harmonics that make it sound more alive?
Yes, that's exactly it. It's the soft clipping you get from that specific vintage transistor design. It adds warmth, it adds thickness, a kind of richness to the original tone.
So you get this feeling of it being louder, or at least denser, even before any echo starts.
Right. It's modeling a really desirable kind of distortion that just gives the signal weight and presence.
So the preamp is the bedrock. It's the secret sauce that makes sure your dry sound and your echo repeats all sound like they belong together, like they have this analog weight.
Absolutely. Without that colored signal hitting the virtual tape heads, the repeats would just sound thin and tacked on.
And that's really one of the things that sets this apart then. It's not just an echo pedal, it's a full-on tone conditioner, just like the original was for studio guys and guitarists back in the day.
Yep.
Okay, so let's move on to the modern necessities because the tone is vintage, but this thing is built for today. Let's talk about connectivity and control.
The first thing, and its massive upgrade, is true stereo input and output.
The original was mono.
The original was mono, yeah.
Yeah.
So right away, this becomes a pro-level tool for synth players, keyboardists, studio engineers using it on an OSEN.
And guitarists with stereo rigs.
Of course.
Mm.
Having true stereo is just non-negotiable for high-end effects now.
And the pro control options are pretty deep. Full MIDI in and out. Now, for someone who's maybe new to this level of gear, why is MIDI so important when you've got all the knobs right there on the front?
MIDI just opens up a whole other level of control. So you've got 4 presets you can get to with the foot switches, which is great for playing live.
C'est ça, Joel.
But MIDI expands that to 127 presets. So imagine you dial in this really complex rhythmic sound with a specific tape age and saturation. That takes time. MIDI recall makes that setting totally instant. It's crucial for a complex live show or a studio session where you need to pull up specific delay sounds for different songs.
And you've also got USB for updates and an external jack for a foot switch or an expression pedal.
Right, so you can control things like the delay time or the feedback with your foot in real time. But there's one other feature here that really screams pro studio gear.
What's that?
The kill dry option. This is the feature that proves it's not just a fancy pedal, it's a high-end processor.
Okay, explain that use case for someone who maybe hasn't worked in a studio. Why do you need to kill the dry signal?
So when you're using an effect on a mixing board, like a delay, you usually put it on what's called an auxiliary send. This means your dry guitar signal stays on its own channel and you send a copy of it to the delay unit. The echo sound then comes back on a separate channel.
So you can mix them together.
Exactly. The kill dry function lets you tell the RE202 to only output the wet signal, the echoes. If you didn't have that, you'd have your main dry signal from the board plus another dry signal coming from the pedal.
And they'd be slightly out of phase, right?
And it would sound thin and muddy, a classic phase problem. Kill dry gives you that perfect, clean separation you need for professional parallel processing.
That one little detail really does separate it from the pack. It's a true studio workhorse. All right, so we get the technical foundation now. We understand the simulated tape, the heads, the preamp. Let's talk about the controls, how you actually sculpt this sound. We can start with the traditional tape echo controls.
Okay, so the main delay controls are, conceptually simple, but they're really deep because they're mimicking a physical machine.
Right.
Take repeat rate.
Right.
That's just your delay time, but it's framed as virtual tape speed. So when you slow the tape down, the delay time gets longer and vice versa. But the crucial thing is, as you turn that knob, it affects the pitch of the repeats.
It bends them, just like real tape.
Just like real tape. It's really smooth and musical.
And then you've got intensity, which is feedback. If repeat rate is time, I guess intensity is density.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, and this is where it becomes a dream for ambient players. Intensity is the regeneration, how many times the echo repeats before it fades away, and when you crank it.
It goes into self-oscillation.
Yes, and the sources are really clear on this. It self-oscillates beautifully. It's not that harsh digital clipping you get from some pedals. It's this rich, dark, really controllable feedback that you can play with.
Then you've got the basic tone shaping. Echo volume, and then bass and treble.
Right, and those EQs only affect the repeats, which is important. It lets you tuck the echoes behind your dry signal by, say, rolling off the highs so they get darker with each repeat.
But the real magic, the real analog texture, comes from the other two knobs, right? The modulation and saturation controls.
Exactly. These are separate from the main delay controls. You have a dedicated knob for wow and flutter.
So for anyone listening, that's the classic imperfection of tape. That sort of wobble. The slow pitch variation is wow, and the faster jittery variation is flutter.
And that's what makes tape feel so organic and three-dimensional. The RE202 gives you a dedicated knob to control how much of that you want, and right next to it is the saturation knob.
Which is tied directly to that preamp and tape model we talked about.
Yep. You can use it to intentionally push the input and the virtual tape into this sweet harmonic overdrive. You can go from just a little bit of warming to some pretty significant grit, all while keeping the echoes clear. These two knobs are where you dial in the real analog character.
Okay, so moving beyond the basic timing, the absolute heart of the Space Echo sound has always been its rhythmic side. And that's all about the mode selector.
Right. The original RE201 had these multiple playback heads set at different distances along the tape. And by choosing different combinations of those heads, you could create these really cool rhythmic patterns.
And the RE2A2 gives you 14 different combinations.
14 modes, yeah. It's a lot.
So how does that translate into actual rhythms? What do the different combo singles, duals, triples actually sound like?
Well, let's say you set the tape speed to a basic quarter note. If you select a mode that uses head 1 and 2, you might get a dotted eighth note repeat alongside that quarter note repeat.
Ah, that classic U2 syncopated sound.
Exactly. Or if you select a mode with all 3 heads at once, you might get a dense, cascading triplet feel. And because the virtual heads are at fixed distances, the time relationship between them is always musically related. It's not random.
So that's the difference between this and just a regular delay pedal with a tap tempo. The rhythms are baked into the geometry of the machine.
That's a perfect way to put it. That's what makes it such a rhythmic instrument in itself, perfect for post-rock, dub, psychedelic stuff. You can create these complex interlocking patterns just by switching modes.
It's incredible. And that leads us to what a lot of the sources call the real game changer on this unit, the tape age modeling.
This is huge.
It's like having 3 different space echoes in one box, one that's brand new, one that's been used a bit, and one that's basically falling apart. You just press a button to switch between them. Let's break down those 3 modes: new, aged, and worn.
So you start with the new setting. This is the sound of a perfectly maintained machine with a fresh reel of tape.
Clean.
Super clean. Stable, clear, smooth. Very little extra coloration or noise. This is your high fidelity foundation. It's great for modern ambient stuff where you want that tape feel, but you still need a lot of clarity.
Okay, then you switch to aged. This is where the character starts to creep in.
Yeah, this model's medium wear and tear. The tone gets darker, you get more high frequency roll-off, so the repeats get muddy a little faster.
And the modulation gets deeper.
Yep, the wow and flutter gets a bit more pronounced, and you start to hear a little bit of tape hiss in the background.
Yeah.
That's that classic sound of a machine that's been on the road for a few years. Warm, colored, definitely vintage.
And finally, you have worn tape. This is for when you want maximum character. This is the lo-fi setting.
This is total instability. The sources call it unstable, heavily saturated, noisy, and gritty. But, and this is so important, they say it's all done in a musical way.
I love that.
It means you get the most extreme pitch drift, the most compression and saturation, and a really dark, filtered sound. This is the setting for lo-fi textures, for those deep, unpredictable, warped repeats that sound like the machine is on its last legs.
It's amazing that they could model the noise and instability so well that they could actually engineer it to be musical. It's not just random static, it's tape noise.
That intentionality is everything. The ability to just switch between these 3 personalities on the fly is what gives you the sonic fingerprint of decades of use.
And the tape echo is the main event, but we can't forget the reverb. That's also been massively expanded and turns this into a full-on atmosphere machine.
Right, so the foundation is still there. The iconic RE201 spring reverb.
That splashy, almost metallic sound.
Yeah, the chaotic decay that blooms right after the note.
Yeah.
But they added 2 new options that are really important for modern production.
Okay, what are they and how do they change what you can do with it?
The new additions are plate and hall. A plate reverb gives you that smooth, dense sound from a vintage 70s recording studio. It's a much more musical and less boingy decay than the spring.
Right.
And then the hall reverb is just a huge ambient spatial wash. Think of Cathedral. It's that ethereal long-tail reverb you need for cinematic sound design.
So as the sources say, you can blend these new reverbs with the tape echo to create massive atmospheric depth.
Yeah, it really takes it from being just a delay pedal to being a complete environment builder.
Okay, so as we move into how people actually use this thing, the RE202 really stands out because of its real-time expressive controls. These are features that were just not possible on the original machine.
Not in a controllable way, at least.
Let's start with the basics for performance. It has tap tempo, obviously, so you can sync the delay time to the music. And it has a hold mode.
Yeah, the hold mode lets you do sound-on-sound looping and controlled oscillation.
Sound on sound on a tape echo is a classic sound. So it's like a looper, but a tape looper.
Exactly. You can layer sounds over and over, but every time the loop goes around, it passes through the virtual tape circuit again. So your loops will slowly degrade and saturate and take on the character of whatever tape age setting you're on.
That degradation is the whole point of tape looping.
It's essential for creating those evolving experimental textures.
But the really crazy advanced features are warp and twist. This is where the digital side of it really gets to show off.
These are for dramatic, on-the-fly sonic manipulation. Let's start with warp.
Okay, describe warp. When I press that button, what am I actually hearing? It's not just speeding up the delay, is it?
It's much more than that. It dynamically messes with the virtual tape speed to create these deep pitch bends and huge ambient swells. Think about the sound of someone physically putting their finger on the tape reel of an old machine to slow it down.
You get that big pitch dive.
Right. Warp gives you a perfect, controlled musical version of that effect. You can create these dreamy, stretched-out pitch shifts that are absolutely essential for cinematic textures and ambient music. It's like controlled tape destruction.
So it's using that physics modeling we talked about. The DSP knows that if the tape speed changes that fast, the pitch has to change with it.
Exactly. It makes the pitch shift a playable musical thing.
And twist, that sounds like the opposite, like pushing it into total runaway feedback.
It's pretty much that. It's synchronized, echo-mangling, self-oscillation. So you know how the intensity knob will slowly build up feedback? Twist just instantly throws the unit into this crazy controlled feedback loop that you can manipulate in real time.
Perfect for those sudden, intense sweeps and textures you hear in experimental music.
Yeah, for when you need a momentary explosion of echo chaos, but you don't want to lose complete control of your sound.
So for an ambient musician, these two features, warp and twist, are just massive. They let you create these huge swells and infinite trails.
It confirms this isn't just for classic sounds. It's a modern texture generator, a playable instrument.
So if we put all of this together, the modeled heads, the 3 tape ages, the preamp saturation, these performance controls, what's the overall tonal range of this thing?
It's huge. The spectrum is just massive. It goes all the way from these pristine, clear, stable tape repeats.
That would be the new tape setting with low saturation.
Right. All the way to those heavily modulated, warm, dark, worn-out repeats we were talking about.
Using the worn setting with the wow and flutter cranked up.
And in between all of that, you can create these beautiful modulated analog textures and get that classic vintage tape compression from the preamp.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
It means the tone is just so much more detailed and nuanced than on older digital units, even the compact RE2. The complexity of how all these things interact, the head combinations, the tape physics, the preamp, it gets so much closer to that unpredictable but musical quality of a real vintage machine. The detail is in the imperfections.
Okay, let's get practical. Let's break down the different use cases from the sources, because the versatility is what makes it a flagship product. We have to start with the most obvious one. Classic tape echo.
This is the bread and butter. It absolutely nails those foundational sounds that define so much music. You know, the quick, tight slapback for rockabilly.
Yeah.
The big saturated repeats for surf music where that spring reverb is just as important. Those swirling modulated echoes for psychedelic rock and shoegaze. The gritty delay for blues.
Then dub. You can't forget dub.
Oh, absolutely not.
Right.
The rhythmic saturation needed for classic dub, where the echo becomes part of the rhythm section, it just does all of that flawlessly.
Then you have the next category, which is more specialized. Rhythmic multi-head patterns.
Right. This is where you're really using those 14 head combinations, that U2 style syncopation, where the different heads create these interlocking rhythms that fill up space without getting in the way.
And post-rock. Right.
Definitely.
Huh.
For those dense, atmospheric textures where the delays build and build over these long passages of music. And because it's true stereo, you can place those rhythmic patterns anywhere you want in the mix.
Then we get into the more modern sound design territory, ambient and cinematic use.
This is where those digital expansions really earn their keep. You combine a lot of wow and flutter with the worn tape setting to create these lush, slow-moving, warped pads for film scores.
And using warp and twist for those big dramatic effects.
Yeah, for the pitch bending, the infinite swells, the controlled feedback drops that you need for modern scoring, and the Hall and Plate reverbs give you the massive sense of space you need for that.
And what about for the sonic explorers? The people who use their pedals like their modular synths, experimental use.
For them, it's all about pushing the limits. using the hold mode for that degrading sound-on-sound looping, deliberately using the intensity and twist knobs to create evolving noise textures and rhythmic artifacts.
And just mangling the sound with the warp feature.
To create sounds that aren't even musical in a traditional sense. Sound effects, strange sonic events.
And finally, the ultimate pro environment, studio mixing.
This use case is what confirms its status as a full-on tape echo processor. Because it's true stereo, has the kill dry option, and that amazing preamp, it gets used on everything, not just guitar.
Like what?
Vocals, synths, drum machines, keyboards, bass. On vocals, the preamp adds warmth and weight before the echo even starts. For synths, the stereo field and analog color can bring a digital synth patch to life. It just enhances any signal you run through it. It's the modern pro-level tape echo workstation.
It really is like one machine that can do the work of a whole studio's worth of vintage gear, all perfectly packaged for today.
So to really put the RE202 in its proper place, we need to look at it in context, compare it to its own family, its own lineage, and also the competition.
Roland and VSS have tried this before, right? There was the RE20 back in 2007, and even a smaller, compact RE2 that came out the same year as this one. The sources say the RE202 is the undisputed king. What makes it so much better than its own siblings?
It really comes down to processing power and the depth of the feature set. The old RE20 was great for its time, but it was mono, had way less memory, and its DSP just couldn't handle the kind of simultaneous component-level modeling we've been talking about.
It was a good picture of the sound, but not a simulation of the machine.
A very good way to put it. Yeah. And the compact RE2 that's designed for a small pedal board, it's simpler. It doesn't have the dedicated tape age button or all three reverb types or the separate saturation and wow flitter knobs. The RE202 is the no-compromise full-featured supercomputer version. It models the physics.
So it beats out the older versions, and the sources say it also surpasses countless boutique clones and software plugins. And the reason is that depth of research. They had the original blueprints. They measured actual old machines.
Right. They didn't just guess what happens to the high frequencies on old tape. They measured the magnetic flux and frequency response of real, aging tape and built the digital model on that hard data. That deep dive into the mechanical reality is why it's the ultimate evolution of that legacy.
And you see that reflected in who's using it. Ambient guitarists, synth players, producers, film composers, live performers. The fact that it's being used by so many different high-end professionals really confirms its status as this versatile pro tool.
Which leads us to that very bold statement we found in the sources, and it's a contentious one. For many, the RE202 is the best tape echo ever made, period. Analog or digital.
That's a massive claim. I have to ask, the sources must address the counterargument, right? That a digital unit, no matter how perfectly its model, can't truly replicate the organic, unpredictable failures of a real, aging analog machine.
That's a crucial question, and yes, they do anticipate it. Their answer is really interesting. It lies in the idea of selectable imperfections.
Okay.
The argument is that, yes, a vintage analog unit might fail in truly unpredictable ways, but the RE202 lets the musician choose and control the most musically desirable failures.
Ah, I see.
By giving you those three tape age models, new, aged, worn, it gets rid of the risk of your real analog machine actually breaking down in the middle of a gig while still giving you those perfect sonic flaws. The argument is that controlled, repeatable musical failure is better than uncontrollable, expensive failure. The RE202 has the soul, because the flaws were so meticulously studied and put under your control.
That completely reframes the debate. It's not about analog versus digital anymore. It's about utility and reliability versus pure, unpredictable vintage chaos.
Exactly. So let's just quickly recap the pros that justify its flagship status. It's the most accurate and flexible space echo ever. It has true stereo, that amazing tape age modeling, the new reverbs, the expressive warp and twist functions, full MIDI control for 127 presets.
And it has a low noise floor, unlike the original, and a superb build quality.
Plus that excellent dedicated preamp model. It's a long list.
But for anyone listening who's considering this, we have to talk about the user considerations, the potential downsides or trade-offs.
Of course. First and most obvious, its footprint. This is a big pedal.
It is.
It's way bigger than a standard compact pedal, and if you're trying to manage space on your pedal board, that is a major consideration. Second, the cost. It's a flagship, pro-level workstation, and it's priced like one. It's not for the casual user.
And finally, the very complexity that we've been celebrating this whole time can actually be a downside for some people.
It absolutely can. Yeah. All these multi-parameter controls might just overwhelm someone who just wants a simple slapback echo. To really get the most out of it, you need to understand a little bit about how tape works, what intensity does, what wow and flutter really is, how the head combinations interact.
It's not a plug-and-play pedal.
It demands some engagement, some study. I mean, it could be a simple slapback, but it's arguably overkill if that's all you need it for.
So that brings us to the final summary. The RE202 is Roland and Boss's definitive, modern, and expanded reimagining of the RE201. It takes the physics of the past, perfects it digitally, and then expands it with modern performance controls for today's musician. It is the Space Echo reborn.
And that achievement, that near-perfect modeling of analog physics, expanded digitally with tools like warp and twist, it raises a really important question for you, the listener, to think about.
Okay.
When a digital system can so faithfully reproduce and then let you control and expand upon all the best flaws and characteristics of vintage mechanical gear, the wow and flutter, the noise, the saturation, does that old distinction between analog soul and digital perfection even matter anymore for creativity?
Or has the modern ability to control and recall these musical flaws on demand actually made the digital tool the superior creative platform? That is a fascinating thought to end on, watching this technology not just copy, but maybe even enhance the most beloved gear in music history. Thank you for sharing your sources and for diving deep with us into the legendary world of the Roland RE202 Space Echo.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. You're here because you want to get to the heart of something complex, maybe something a bit obscure, and you want that knowledge distilled.
And today we have a really fascinating topic.
We're focusing on a piece of gear that sort of stealthily redefined what an ambient pedal could be. We're talking about the BiSS TE2 Terra Echo.
Yeah, it's such a rewarding subject because the TE2 is a genuine outlier. I mean, when you think of BiSS, you usually think of the workhorses, right? The DS1, the DD3. Exactly. But the TE2, which came out in 2013, it just completely threw out the rule book on what a compact stomp box was supposed to do.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack this thing because it really does defy the usual categories. It's not a delay.
Not in any traditional sense. No tap tempo, no clean repeats.
And it's not just a reverb either. It doesn't just put you in a simulated room.
No, that's the key. We'd have to categorize it as an ambient delay reverb hybrid. I mean, the name Terra Echo is a huge clue to its scale.
So it's not repeating your notes. What is it doing?
It's acting like a dynamic atmosphere engine. It builds this shimmering, swelling, modulating ambient tail. It's this ethereal wash that can take one simple guitar line and just explode it into this massive stereo soundscape.
Which is precisely why our sources call it one of the most creative pedals BOSS ever made. It's just doing something fundamentally different.
Completely different.
So let's get into that. What makes this effect so dynamic, so harmonic, so alive? It all seems to come down to one piece of tech. BOS MDP.
Multidimensional processing. Yeah, that's the secret sauce. Yeah. What's so fascinating about MDP is that it's what allows the effect to feel like it's reacting to you.
Okay, so a standard digital delay, it just takes your signal, copies it, and plays it back.
Right. As one single stream of information, MDP just completely rejects that model.
So how is the MDP engine processing the sound differently? What's going on under the hood?
Well, it uses specialized circuitry to analyze your guitar signal across multiple independent frequency bands all at the same time.
So it's not one copier, it's...
Think of it less like a copier and more like dozens of tiny specialized echo units. And each one is tailored to react only to specific harmonics in your note. It's sculpting the effect based on the harmonic complexity, not just the volume.
So it's not a blanket effect, it's a dynamic sculpture based on the frequencies you feed it.
That's a huge shift for a compact pedal back in 2013.
It really is. And the sources all detail how the MDP engine is reacting to your input level in real time. It uses these complex reverb delay diffusion algorithms.
Okay, diffusion. Let's break that down for the listener.
Diffusion is basically the smearing or dissolving of sound. So instead of sharp, clear repeats, the sound just instantly melts to this ambience. Think of it like the difference between a high-def photo of an echo versus an oil painting where all the colors blend and smear together.
That's a great analogy, and you mentioned it responds to the player's input envelope. What does that mean for me, the person with the guitar in my hands?
It means it's listening to how you play. The input envelope is your attack, how hard you pick the string, and how fast the note fades out.
If you hit a note hard, the MDP engine sees that initial spike, and it adjusts the density of the spatial effect immediately. But if you let a chord ring out, it recognizes that slow decay and lets the ambient tail build and swell more gradually. It feels like it's breathing with you.
That's That's incredible for a pedal. It's altering the effect based on how I'm playing, not just what I'm playing.
Precisely. It keeps the effect feeling organic, constantly in motion. It avoids that cold, static digital feel of older effects. And the pedal's built for it, Buffered bypass and stereo output is absolutely essential to get that huge three-dimensional spread it's famous for.
You'd need that stereo field to really hear a sound described as massive. Okay, so the MDP engine is doing all this complex work inside, but the interface, the part the user sees, it seems deceptively simple, just 4 knobs.
They look like standard BOS knobs, yeah. But they control these really nuanced, interconnected parts of the effect.
So we've got E-level, tone, feedback, and S-time. E-level is just the wet-dry mix.
Straightforward.
Tone controls the brightness of that echo field. And feedback, well, that's the intensity, the regeneration.
Yeah, and feedback is where you really start to dial in the density. If you max it out, the effect doesn't just trail on forever. It builds on itself, creating these deep, modulated clouds of sound. But the 4th knob, S-time, spread time, that's the real key.
What is spread time actually controlling here?
It's controlling how large, slow, and expansive the whole effect becomes. You're basically telling those diffusion algorithms how fast or slow to work. A low S-time setting keeps it tight, almost like a huge, diffuse slapback echo. But a high S-time setting that forces the signal to diffuse and modulate much, much slower. That's where you get those huge oceanic washes of sound. It controls the scale of the world you're building.
So one knob gives you this massive sonic range, but the real game changer, the reason ambient players love this thing, it's not just the knobs, it's the foot switch, isn't it?
It's the hold function. Absolutely critical. You hold the foot switch down for just 2 seconds, and the pedal freezes the current ambient tail indefinitely.
Yeah. So you can sustain, say, a big lush chord, lock in that ambient cloud it creates, and then you can play clean lead lines right over the top of it.
Exactly that. It's essential for creating those deep sustained pads or drones without needing a separate looper. The source material calls it synth-like guitar soundscaping. It turns the pedal into an infinite pad generator.
It stops being an effect and starts being an instrument in its own right.
That's a perfect way to put it.
That's where it gets truly interesting. So let's talk about that sound. The descriptions they're really evocative. They go way beyond just echo or reverb.
The language has to, because the sound is so unique. People use terms like pad-like, angelic blooming, even geometric reverb. My favorite is crystal cloud diffusion.
Crystal cloud diffusion. I love that.
These terms exist because it's not a simple repetition. It's fundamentally synthetic and atmospheric.
I want to zero in on one phrase I saw. Granular shimmer without shimmer pitch. How does it get that ethereal texture without that classic, sometimes kind of harsh octave-up shimmer effect?
It's just very clever modulation and diffusion. Traditional shimmer adds a pitch-shifted octave. The TE2 doesn't do that. Instead, that dynamic processing is constantly smearing the high frequencies and harmonics that are already there. The tail is always shifting and swelling, so you get the feeling of high-frequency movement, that shimmer, but it never actually transposes the pitch. It keeps the whole atmosphere harmonically pure, but it feels alive.
It's the difference between adding glitter and just making the surface reflective.
That's brilliant.
So let's map this back to the controls. How does the sound change as you turn up, say, the E-level knob?
Well, if you keep the E level low, say below 10 o'clock, it's a really subtle enhancement. An always-on sweetener. It adds this harmonic bloom and width to your tone without being obvious.
It gives you a bit of dimension.
Exactly. Then you move into the mid settings and you get what we'd call the lush ambient halo. This is the sweet spot for textural stuff, making pads that sit behind chords, adding smooth trails to lead lines, making volume swells just bloom.
And then, what happens when you crank it? E-level, feedback, S-time, all pushed high.
That's when you unlock the infinite ambient soundscapes. That is the pedal's true identity. You get that massive stereo spread, these deep self-modulating textures. It completely transforms a single note into an evolving pad.
And I imagine the tone knob plays a big role there, too.
Oh, huge. Roll the tone back with those high settings, and you get these warm, dark, cinematic swells that feel more menacing than angelic. The range is just astonishing.
So given that range, the use cases are pretty specific, right? What are the main applications people use this for?
It's all about texture and immersion. So naturally, ambient guitar, shoegaze, worship music, they're at the top of the list.
Okay.
In worship settings, it's used all the time for building drones and filling huge spaces.
And what about in a studio where you might need more clarity?
It's the go-to when a track needs massive depth without the rhythmic clutter of a normal delay. And that hold function is invaluable for producers. You can freeze a texture and just treat it like a background synth layer.
Then there's lead guitar enhancement. This is where that dynamic response really comes into play, I'd guess.
Absolutely. It lifts the performance. It adds this emotional harmonic swell and that shimmering tail without the distraction of, those classic digital delay artifacts. It just makes a soaring lead line feel huge.
It really sounds like a revolutionary piece of kit. But, we always have to balance the view. Let's start with the big pros.
The pros are substantial. I mean, it is undeniably one of the most original compact pedals BOSS has ever made. The MDP tech results in this organic, evolving spatial behavior.
And the hold function.
The hold function is a killer feature on its own. And crucially, for this kind of music, it works beautifully in stereo with a really low noise floor, even when you're creating these huge, dense sounds.
Okay, so let's introduce some tension. What are the considerations? The caveats? A tool this unique can't be right for every situation.
It isn't. And first and foremost, it is not for you if you need a defined rhythmic delay. If your song needs a dotted eighth note repeat, this is not the pedal. It will just smear that rhythm into a wash.
Right. It's an atmosphere engine, not a clock.
Exactly. And because it creates these massive textures, it can absolutely swamp a mix if you're not careful with the E level and feedback knobs. It needs careful placement, usually last or near last in your signal chain.
Now, we talked about the dynamic response being a huge pro. Can that ever be a drawback? Is it ever too unpredictable?
It can be. For some players, that organic interaction is what ambient players love. But if you're used to a fixed digital effect that sounds identical every single time, this can be a learning curve. You have to learn how the pedal reacts to your playing. If you're inconsistent, the soundscape shifts. It asks you to be responsive.
A fascinating trade-off.
Yeah.
Organic feel for strict predictability. This brings us to its historical significance. 2013 isn't that long ago, but it feels like the TE2 really marked a turning point.
It absolutely marked BOSS's transition into, let's call it next-gen ambient effects. You have to remember the context in 2013. This was one of the first compact, affordable pedals to behave like an evolving ambient processor, not just a simple echo.
So it came before the big boom in boutique shimmer and ambient pedals we see now.
Conceptually, it really did set the stage. It proved a compact digital pedal could be more than the sum of its parts. And because it was so original, it quietly became a favorite in those worship, cinematic, and post-rock circles. It slowly got that sleeper classic status.
So to bring it all together, we started by saying it's not a delay and it's not a reverb. And our deep dive has really confirmed that.
Absolutely. The TE2 Terra Echo is a groundbreaking ambient engine. It blends delay, reverb, diffusion, and modulation into this living, breathing, spatial effect that responds to you. It's not about repeating notes. It's about creating worlds around your playing. It's about immersion.
It's a really powerful idea, turning a single note into an entire atmosphere, all from one small silver box.
It really is. And here's a final thought to leave you with. While the TE2 might not get the same attention as some of its famous analog siblings, our sources suggest that many of today's boutique ambient pedals, the ones focused on freezing, evolving textures, dynamic diffusion, they all owe a significant conceptual debt to the ideas the Terra Echo first brought to the mass market.
So its influence goes way beyond its initial release date.
It suggests that true innovation really does transcend immediate market success. Its DNA is everywhere.
Something to consider as you notice how far the ideas in this one unique pedal have spread. That was our deep dive into the BOSS TE2 Terra Echo. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are setting aside the digital stuff for a bit.
Yeah, we're going full analog.
Absolutely. We're digging into the tech docs, the history, everything surrounding really one of the most legendary guitar pedals ever, the BOSS DM2 analog delay.
And its modern evolution, the DM2W Waza Craft, which is quite something in itself.
It really is. So this is a deep dive into character, right?
Exactly. Our mission here is to unpack why that original DM2 sound became so iconic. You always hear those words, warm, dark, musical. We need to look at the technical quirks, maybe compromises that actually created that sound.
And then see how the new one, the DM2W, managed to, keep that vibe alive while fixing some of the old problems.
Right. Bringing it up to date without losing the magic.
The goal, like always, is to give you that expert shortcut. So you walk away really understanding the engineering behind the sound, not just the features list.
Okay, so let's start with the legend itself. The original DM2 came out in '81.
BOSS's first compact delay. And it pretty much set the bar for analog BBD delays right away.
It really did. And the reason is all about the tech inside. That sound profile everyone talks about, those warm, kind of rounded repeats,
Yeah.
that's down to how it works. The repeats naturally lose high frequencies. They sort of degrade organically. They get softer with each echo, but not just quieter.
Okay, that degradation thing. It's interesting because digital delays now give you perfect copies, crystal clear. So why do guitarists still get so misty-eye about this, like, soft, dark decay?
Well, that's the bucket brigade device, the BBD chip. We should probably explain that quickly for anyone who hasn't tinkered inside one of these.
Good idea.
So the BBD chip, think of it like a chain of tiny capacitors. They pass the electrical charge or guitar signal down the line one step at a time.
Like that old analogy, passing buckets of water down a line. And a little bit spills each time.
That's exactly it. And that spillage is the signal losing a tiny bit of fidelity, a bit of clarity at each step. And that loss shows up as that beautiful, dark softening, especially in the high end. It's technically a limitation, sure, but it's precisely why the repeats sit so well behind your main guitar sound. They don't clutter things up.
Right. They don't step on the dry signal.
That's the heart of its musicality, really.
And that sound, that characteristic, made it a big deal culturally. Almost instantly. The sources mention how versatile it was. It wasn't just for, spacey stuff. It was perfect for that classic rockabilly or blues slapback echo. But then you had players like Andy Summers, The Edge.
Oh, yeah. Using it for those huge layered textures. Stadium rock wouldn't sound the same.
John Frusciante, too, famously loves them.
When a technical limitation basically defines a sound for genres. Yeah, that's special. Now, if you're out there looking for one of these vintage ones, the 81 to 84 units, there's a really important difference inside them that affects the tone. Something collectors look for.
Right. This is about the actual BBD chips they used during that original run.
Exactly. The early pedals used an MN3005 chip, and critically, those pedals ran at 18 volts internally. That gave them more headroom.
Okay, so what does that mean in terms of sound?
People usually describe the MN3005 units as a bit smoother, maybe a little quieter, just cleaner because of that extra voltage.
But then BOSS switched,
Yeah.
right, to the MN3005 chip in the later ones. Was that deliberate, like let's change the sound, or just parts availability?
Most signs point to supply chain, yeah. Component availability probably drove the change. The MN3005 version, it's known for having a bit more grain, a slightly dirtier character overall.
Interesting.
So if you're a player comparing them, the MN3005 is maybe the creamier one, and the MN3205 gets a little grittier, especially if you push it.
So collecting these isn't just about age, it's about finding a specific sonic flavor, that subtle difference in grain. Oh, that's real analog nerd territory.
It is, and you had to work with it because the controls were so simple. Repeat rate, echo, intensity, that's it.
And repeat rate, that's the delay time.
Yeah.
And here's that famous limitation we talk about. 30 to 300 milliseconds, that's the max.
Yeah, 300 milliseconds, it's really short by modern standards. You barely get out of slapback territory.
We really are limited there.
Right. It forces you to be creative in a certain way. You can't just dial up endless long repeats. But what you could do, and what people loved, was crank that intensity knob.
That's the feedback control.
Exactly. Max that out, and you get that wild, infinite self-oscillation, the spaceship landing sound. That's a huge part of the DM2 mystique. It basically turns the pedal into its own instrument.
Okay, so great sound, iconic oscillation. But before we jump to the modern Waza version, we absolutely have to talk about the big practical headache for vintage owners.
Yeah.
It's easy to forget if you're not deep into pedals.
Oh, yeah. The power issue.
The power issue. Explain this, because it was a real pain.
It's the biggest operational hurdle with a vintage DM2. It needed the old BOSS ACA adapter standard, not the modern PSA standard that, pretty much everything else uses now.
And what happens if you mess that up? Why was it such a big deal for gigging players?
Well, the ACA standard was unregulated 12-volt power that the pedal internally regulated down. If you plugged an original DM2 into a modern standard 9-volt regulated power supply, like from a pedal board brick, the pedal basically gets starved for voltage. It sounds weak, choked, fizzy, or sometimes it just wouldn't work properly. It wouldn't have the right internal voltage for those BBDs to sound good.
So you were stuck using batteries, which die, or carrying this one specific old style adapter just for that pedal.
Exactly. A total pain on a modern pedal board.
Okay, so we have this iconic pedal, beloved sound, slightly noisy, power hungry, short delay time. Its flaws became its character.
Pretty much.
But those operational issues are exactly what the modern DM2W Wazacraft aimed to fix.
Right. The whole Wazacraft series, starting with the DM2W back in 2014, it's just a brilliant example of how to do a reissue, right? The philosophy wasn't just copy it, it was preserve that BBD warmth, the actual soul of the pedal, but bring it into the modern era with needed refinements and more flexibility. Give people the tone without the vintage logistical nightmare.
And the DM2W nails the big technical problems right off the bat. It's still all analog signal path, still uses BBDs.
Correct. Still the real deal analog delay line. But crucially, it uses the modern standard PSA adapter. Problem solved. Plug it into anything.
Huge relief for players, I bet.
Oh, absolutely. And it also has much better noise reduction circuitry, so that background hiss and clock noise you'd get, especially at longer delay times on the original, drastically reduced, cleaner operation.
Okay, so better power, less noise. But the real game changer, the reason the DM2W isn't just a nostalgia piece, is that dual mode system, right? The little switch on top.
That mode switch is pure genius. It effectively gives you two distinct top-tier analog delays in one box.
Let's break that down. First is standard mode.
Standard mode is the faithful recreation. They meticulously replicated the original 1981 DM2 circuit, so you get that dark, lush, organic thing. Yeah. And yes, it keeps the original limitation. It tops out around 300 milliseconds.
So it is the vintage experience, if you want it.
Exactly. Pure vintage tone, but with modern reliability and power.
Okay. But then you flip that switch to custom mode.
And that's where the Waza engineers really earned their paychecks. The pedal completely opens up.
How so? What are the key changes in custom mode?
It basically transforms it from that specialized short delay into a much more versatile, almost ambient-capable machine. First, the delay time range gets a massive boost, all the way up to about 800 milliseconds max.
Wow. Okay, that's more than double. Takes you from slapback territory well into longer atmospheric repeats.
Definitely. And just as important, custom mode has higher headroom, and the repeats themselves are noticeably brighter and cleaner compared to standard mode.
Ah, interesting.
It still has that analog BBD warmth, that character, but it doesn't have the extreme high-frequency roll-off that the original circuit had, especially pushed past 300 meters.
That sounds like a really important difference for modern music production.
Yeah.
If you're building big ambient textures in a studio, maybe you want that analog feel, but you need more clarity and headroom so the repeats don't just turn to mush.
You absolutely nailed it. Custom mode lets you use the core analog BBD sound in ways the original DM2 just couldn't handle without getting really noisy or indistinct. It's the vintage warmth, but with like modern studio control.
And they didn't stop at the sound.
Yeah.
The connectivity got some major upgrades too, which is crucial for modern setups.
Totally. The DM2W adds an expression pedal input. That's huge.
What does that let you do?
Control the repeat rate, the delay time with your foot using an expression pedal. So you can do those cool pitch bending effects, manually sweeping the delay time for these soaring, almost synth-like sounds. Stuff you just can't do easily twisting knobs.
Very cool.
Yeah.
It also has dual outputs now.
Yep. Direct and effect outputs. So you can run a true stereo dry-wet setup, send your clean guitar sound to one amp, and just the delay repeats to another. Creates these huge, wide soundscapes. Or just makes it super easy to integrate into complex studio routing.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this whole evolution.
Right.
Original DM2 defined that analog warmth, 300 meters range, gritty character, power headaches.
Yeah, the flawed legend.
And the DM2W. What's the final word on its significance?
The DM2W is just. It's the textbook example of how to do a modern reissue perfectly. It kept the essential analog BBB soul that players crave, but it fixed every single practical problem. The old power standard, the noise floor, the short delay time. It expanded the fidelity, the flexibility across that wider 20 to 800 millisecond range. It basically became an instant classic itself, a go-to for pros who need that reliable analog character on their boards.
It really gives the player a clear choice. Lean into the authentic, maybe slightly rougher standard mode, or use the expanded, cleaner custom mode,
Yes,
all powered conveniently.
Exactly right. The original DM2's magic was so tied up in its imperfections, that BBD high-frequency loss. The DM2W pulled off this brilliant trick, kept that exact character available in standard mode, but also engineered around those limitations for modern players in custom mode.
That wraps up this deep dive perfectly. But before we go, here's something to think about, a final thought for you. The original DM2, with its tight 300 meters limit, it really forced players to be concise, to be musical with those short echoes.
Mm-hmm. Constraint breeds creativity.
So now that the DM2W offers up to 800 milliseconds in custom mode, does having all that extra space maybe dilute the focus sometimes? Does it make it easier to be less musically intentional? Or does it simply free up that classic analog tone for totally new musical ideas? Something to chew on how limitations sometimes shape the sounds we end up calling iconic.
You know those moments in music where a single note just seems to bloom? It stretches out, repeats, swirls around, creates this incredible depth.
Yeah, that delay magic.
Exactly. Today, we're diving deep into where that kind of sound really became, well, accessible for pretty much every musician.
That's right. We're unpacking the story of a real game changer, the Boss DD2 digital delay. Our sources for this deep dive, they're pretty solid, lots of great articles, historical accounts. They really detail its history, the tech inside, and honestly, it's almost legendary status now.
Okay, so our mission, like always, is to cut through all the tech talk, pull out the really important stuff, and give you the shortcut to understanding why this little stomp box became such a giant, what made it so special back then, and why are people still talking about it, collecting it decades later.
Let's get into it.
All right.
So let's set the scene. Picture yourself, you're a musician, early 80s, you want delay, right? What are your options?
Well, not great ones mostly. You're probably looking at bulky tape units. Think Echoplex, maybe a Roland Space Echo. Iconic sound, sure, but a total pain to haul around and keep working. Right?
Exactly. Temperamental things. Or if you had serious cash or studio access, maybe these massive, super expensive rack mount digital delays.
So getting that kind of pristine, studio digital delay sound onto a stage in a pedal, that was basically just a dream.
Pretty much a pipe dream. Yeah, it was a real barrier, creatively and practically.
Okay.
Until 1983.
Yeah.
Boss just completely changed the game with the DD2. And it wasn't just like another delay pedal. It was the very first compact digital delay. Period.
The first one ever in a pedal format.
The first. Think about that. They took technology that lived in expensive studio racks, shrunk it down, and literally put studio-grade digital delay right at your feet in a stomp box.
That's huge for gigging musicians. I mean, suddenly you don't need a van just for your delay effect.
Right. You just slap this little orange box on your board.
And it wasn't just small, was it? The sources stress it wasn't like a toy version. It was powerful.
Precisely. That's the key thing. It wasn't a compromise. It actually used the exact same 12-bit PCM chip, the brain, basically, as the Roland SDE 3000 rack unit.
Wait, the SDE 3000, that was like the professional standard in studios then, wasn't it?
Top tier. A studio staple worldwide.
Yeah.
So you were getting that sound quality, but now it was portable, accessible. It was, well, revolutionary, nothing short of it.
Okay, so how? How did they cram all that studio power into a little pedal? What was the magic under the hood?
Well, that's the brilliant engineering part. So at its heart, it used 12-bit PCM digital processing. Now, 12-bit...
Which sounds maybe low-res today, but back then...
Back then, it was cutting edge for something like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, 12-bit on its own has limitations. So to get more out of it dynamically, they use this clever trick called companding.
Companding, like compressing and expanding?
Sort of, yeah. Think of it like intelligently boosting the quiet bits before it gets stored digitally and then bringing them back down on playback. It made the 12 bits sound a lot richer, giving it more perceived dynamic range.
Whoop.
Very clever. And this wasn't cheap, off-the-shelf stuff. This was high-tech for a pedal in '83.
You mentioned high-tech, and the sources do say the memory chip they needed, the digital memory, was physically large and really expensive back then.
Oh, yeah. That definitely pushed the price up.
So did that make it hard to sell initially, or was the demand just overwhelming?
It was definitely premium for a pedal.
Yeah.
About, $240 in '83, which, adjusted for inflation, is like closer to $700 today.
Wow. Okay.
But the thing is, musicians were desperate for this. The convenience, the sound quality, it justified the cost pretty quickly.
Right.
Finally, you could get pro delay sounds outside the studio.
Makes sense. And the controls were simple enough.
Yeah, really intuitive for the time. You had your effect level knob, that's your mix, dry versus wet, feedback for how many repeats.
Yeah.
And delay time, obviously, standard stuff.
But there was something else, right? That mode selector?
Ah, yes. The four-way mode selector. That's where it got really innovative and opened up creative doors.
Right. The sources really flagged this. It wasn't just different time ranges. Well, it was, but more than that. You had short, like 50 to 200 milliseconds.
Yep, for your classic slapback stuff.
Then medium, 200 to 800 milliseconds, a bit more space.
Right.
And long for those big ambient washes, 200 up to, 1,600 milliseconds?
1,600, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty epic for the time. But The real showstopper.
Was the hold mode. Everyone mentions the hold mode.
Exactly. That hold mode gave you about 800 milliseconds of looping, or sampling, really.
In 1983, in a delay pedal.
Yeah. I mean, think about that. It was basically an early looper built right in. Mind-blowing stuff back then.
So you could actually layer sounds live.
Totally. Create textures on the fly. And it's interesting, that 800 millisecond limit. It seems short now, but it actually pushed musicians. Well, you couldn't just make endless washes easily. Right. You had to be concise, rhythmic, really creative within that limit. It forced a kind of focused ingenuity. Led to some really cool, tight, rhythmic delay patterns that became signatures for some players. It wasn't a bug, it was a feature, almost.
Okay, that makes sense. So we know the tech, the features, but the sound, what did it actually sound like? Sources call it unique.
It definitely had its own voice. Compared to the older analog delays, the BBD ones.
Bucket Brigade devices.
Right. Those pedals have a cool sound, but they inherently color the tone, add a bit of noise, the repeats get darker and mushier. The DD2, being digital, was way cleaner, much more precise, a big step towards, modern clarity.
But not too clean, apparently. Not sterile like some modern digital stuff can be.
That's the crucial point. You're spot on. It wasn't invisible. It had this slight, almost grainy texture to the repeats.
Grainy from the 12-bit process.
Exactly. It's a characteristic of that early digital tech. And that graininess, combined with the clarity, gave it this unique warmth that, honestly, a lot of super clean modern delays just don't have.
So it kind of bridged the gap. Cleaner than analog, but warmer than later digital.
Perfectly put. It hit this sonic sweet spot. Digital precision, but with character. Analog warmth wasn't quite there. Modern digital often sounds different. It had its own thing. That's why some people still chase that specific sound today.
Right. So when something that cool and useful comes out, the pros usually jump on it pretty fast. Who were some of the big names using the DD2 early on?
Oh, it got adopted quickly.
Wow.
You had guys like The Edge from U2. Now, he's famous for his big rack units, the Korg STD 3000s and such.
His sound is legendary.
But he definitely experimented with the DD2 and its successor, the DD3. You can hear that kind of clean, rhythmic, digital delay in his playing.
Okay. Who else?
Steve Vai. Known for, incredible technique and precision, he relied on these Boss digital delays for those super tight, articulate repeats.
Makes sense for his style. And Andy Summers, The Police, another delay master.
Absolutely. Summers was known to use Boss units, too, weaving them into those atmospheric textures the Police were famous for.
So it wasn't just the big rock stars pushing boundaries. It sounds like it became a real workhorse, too. For session guys.
Totally. Countless session players in the 80s grabbed DB2s. Why? Because they were reliable, they sounded pro, and they were small. A perfect replacement for those clunky racks on countless records and gigs. It just worked. Earned its keep on so many pedal boards.
Interesting. Now, the DD2 itself didn't last that long in production, did it? Only 83 to 85.
Relatively short run, yeah.
Yeah.
But its impact, huge. It basically laid the groundwork, the DNA, for generations of digital delays that followed. It set the standard.
And its successor, the DD3, came out right after in 86.
Yep. And the GD3 was, internally, almost identical at first. The main change was Boss finding cheaper memory chips using surface mount tech, which brought the cost down.
So those early made-in-Japan DD3s are basically DD2s in disguise.
Pretty much. Very similar circuit, very similar sound. And that DD3, well, it became one of Boss's longest-running, most successful pedals ever. Still making variations of it today. Shows how solid that original DD2 design really was.
And the family just grew from there. You got the DD5 later in the 90s, adding tap tempo.
Which was huge for playing live, syncing delays easily.
Then the DD7 in the 2000s, more time, modulation effects.
Analog simulations, too, trying to capture different flavors.
And now the DD8, with stereo, looping built back in, tons of modes. It's clear that lineage all started with the DD2.
No question. It set the stage. Which brings up an interesting point. Why are those original DD2s so collectible now? And often quite pricey?
Yeah, good question. Is it just history? Nostalgia?
That's part of it, for sure. Historical significance. But it really comes back to that unique sound we talked about, that early digital sweet spot. It's cleaner than analog, yeah, but it has that specific warmth, that subtle graininess.
Mm-hmm.
It's just different from hyper-clean modern units. It's a distinct sonic signature that people actively seek out.
So, pulling it all together, what's the big takeaway here? The Boss DD2, it wasn't just another pedal, was it?
Not at all. It was genuinely a revolution. It took professional, studio-level digital delay, shrunk it down into a practical, affordable stomp box, and put it right at the feet of musicians everywhere.
And that just fundamentally changed how people made music, how they thought about using effects, crafting sounds.
Absolutely. The DD2 is more than just gear. It's proof of how smart innovation, even in a small box, can connect different tech eras. It bridged analog and digital in a way, and it sparked so much new musical expression.
Its sound, its whole spirit.
Yeah.
You can still feel its influence today.
Definitely. It's still shaping how people make music, whether they realize it or not.
So here's something to think about. The next time you hear some really cool textured delay, maybe on an old 80s classic, maybe on some cutting-edge ambient track today, just pause for a second. Ask yourself, how much of that sound is truly brand new and how much is maybe standing on the shoulders of that little orange giant, the Boss DD2? It really makes you think about, like, the DNA of sound, where these ideas originally sparked from, doesn't it? Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping in for quite a ride, actually. A 40-year journey, if you can believe it.
40 years, yeah.
Through one of the most iconic, certainly one of the most reliable and really evolutionary pieces of gear ever designed. We're talking about the BI-SS digital delay series.
That yellow box.
Exactly. If you've spent any time at all with an electric instrument in the last, well, 4 decades, you almost certainly know that unmistakable bright yellow stomp box.
Yeah, it's just pretty much unavoidable. But, this is more than just looking back at old pedals. Our mission today, really, is to trace the history of digital signal processing, DSP, but specifically within this single compact format.
Right.
We're tracking a massive technological leap. I mean, a philosophical one, too, in some ways.
Yeah.
Moving from that initial groundbreaking 12-bit innovation of the DD2 way back in 1983.
83, wow.
All the way up to the incredibly powerful 32-bit float engines that are driving today's, flagship units, the DD500.
So the challenge we're tackling here, and sort of the core story for you, the listener, is figuring out how this really high-end tech stuff that used to need, expensive studio racks, huge memory banks, how did that get miniaturized?
Yeah, how did it get refined?
And made affordable enough that, any musician could just slip it into their guitar case. And our starting point, our hook, it really has to be the DD2.
Oh, absolutely.
That pedal genuinely revolutionized music. It took that high-fidelity, studio-grade echo sound and literally put it right at the musician's feet. A total game changer.
And to really get why that was such a leap, we kind of have to rewind a bit to before digital really hit the pedal scene.
Okay.
Before the DD2 showed up in 83, the main way to get delay was analog, usually using BBD's bucket brigade devices.
Right, BBDs. We hear about them all the time now, often with this real reverence for their sound.
And deservedly so, in many ways.
Yeah.
They are beloved now for that darker, sort of warm repeat, the way the sound naturally decays. But back then, they had some pretty strict limitations.
Limitations like what, exactly? We always hear about that analog warmth, but what were musicians actually giving up to get that specific tone?
Well, primarily clarity and stability, and also delay time. In a BBD circuit, the audio signal is literally passed down a chain of capacitors. Think of it like water sloshing along a line of buckets.
Okay, like a bucket brigade, hence the name.
Exactly. And it's all controlled by a clock signal. But the key thing is, the longer you wanted the delay time, the more buckets or stages the signal had to pass through.
Which means more chances for things to go wrong.
Precisely. Each stage added a tiny bit of noise, a tiny bit of signal loss. So as the delay time increased, the noise floor just shot up. The repeats got darker, yes, but also blurrier, noisier. They degraded pretty quickly.
So longer delays were just messy.
Yeah, very much so. The shift to digital, therefore, wasn't just a novelty. It was necessary. It offered pristine, crystal clear repeats. It offered stability. And crucially, it offered much, much longer delay times than analog could realistically achieve without becoming prohibitively noisy or needing incredibly complex, expensive circuitry.
So when we talk about this badass DD journey, we aren't just looking at, a sequence of new pedals coming out. We're really tracking the democratization of cutting-edge DSP technology.
That's a great way to put it.
From that initial 12-bit processing, which must have seemed like science fiction in a pedal in 1983.
Oh, it really was.
Right up to today's super high-resolution stuff, 32-bit float engines running at, 96 kilohertz sample rates.
Yeah, absolutely top-tier stuff.
That huge leap in processing power, in fidelity, all packed into that familiar yellow box, that's the real story we're digging into today.
And that whole journey kicks off with a really remarkable piece of engineering.
Okay, part 1, the digital genesis. We're talking about the 12-bit revolution, really kicked off by the DD2 and then cemented by the incredibly successful DD3.
Right, the DD2. Released in 1983, This thing is a genuine historical milestone. I mean, we really can't overstate its importance.
Why so significant?
Because it was the very first compact digital delay pedal ever successfully brought to market. Full stop. It fundamentally changed what musicians expected an effects pedal could even do.
Before this, digital delay meant what? Big, expensive studio gear?
Exactly. It meant dropping thousands of dollars serious money back then on a bulky, heavy studio rack unit, like the big Lexicons or the Eventides, or closer to home for BiSS, the Roland units.
And that leads to the really interesting part of the DD2's origin story, doesn't it? Where its tech actually came from. It wasn't entirely built from scratch for a pedal format.
No, not at all. BiSS engineers very cleverly essentially borrowed, or maybe adapted is a better word, the core architecture from a much larger professional Roland rack delay unit.
Which one was that?
The Roland SDE 3000. A very highly regarded rack delay from that era.
Okay, so they took studio rack tech.
They absolutely did. They took the core digital engine that includes the analog to digital converters, the digital analog converters, the crucial memory technology, the stuff that powered this massive SDE 3000, which was, a standard piece in high-end studios.
Right.
And they somehow managed to squeeze it, pretty much component by component, into that standard compact BOSS stompbox shell.
That's incredible miniaturization for the time.
It really was. And this technological transfer, taking studio power and putting it in a pedal, that's precisely why the DV2 caused such a massive stir. It genuinely bridged that gap between the expensive, inaccessible studio rack world and the pedal boards of actual working musicians for the very first time.
Now, technically, you mentioned it used a 12-bit PCM digital delay processor. PCM just meaning pulse code modulation, the standard way of digitizing audio.
Yeah.
But you also used a technical term, companding, and said it was key to making it sound professional. For us listening, what exactly is companding, and why was it so crucial for a 12-bit pedal back in 1983?
Right, that's a fantastic question, because companding really is the secret sauce that made that early digital delay sound, usable and relatively quiet, despite the limitations.
Okay.
Think of it like this. 12-bit processing means the digital word representing your guitar's volume at any given instant only has 12 bits of information. Compared to today's 24 or 32 bits, that's quite a low resolution.
Like a low-res digital photo, maybe. Fewer pixels to capture the detail.
Exactly like that. Now, where this becomes a problem is with quiet sounds. When you try to digitize very quiet parts of your signal with only 12 bits, that lack of resolution becomes really apparent. It introduces noise and hiss, basically quantization noise. We call this the noise floor.
So low resolution makes the quiet bits sound kind of fuzzy or noisy.
Precisely. Companding is a two-part process designed to trick the system in a way. First, you compress the dynamic range of the signal before it gets digitized. You artificially boost those very quiet parts, making them louder relative to the loud parts.
Okay, so you squash the dynamics a bit.
Right, so now even the quiet bits are loud enough to be captured more cleanly by the limited 12-bit converter, hopefully staying above that inherent noise floor. Then, after the signal has been stored in memory and is being played back, you reverse the process. You expand the dynamic range back to its original state.
Compacting, compression, then expansion.
You got it. It attenuates those boosted quiet parts back down to their original level. It's essentially an auditory trick, a clever bit of signal processing designed to make relatively low-resolution digital audio sound much, much cleaner and quieter than it actually is, technically speaking.
Yeah.
It was pretty much mandatory to get that professional studio-like clarity from 12-bit tech back then.
And that clarity, even with the underlying tech limits, is what defined its sound, wasn't it? It was incredibly pristine compared to the murky analog BBDs of the day.
Absolutely pristine in comparison.
Yet people now often talk about the DD2 and DD3 having a slight grit or grain. Is that the 12-bit processing showing through, even with companding?
I think that's exactly what it is. Despite the companding, 12-bit is still 12-bit. There's an inherent character there, a slight texture that you don't get with modern super high-fidelity converters. It's clean, yes, but not sterile. And that specific character, that slight grainy quality, is actually highly sought after now for its sort of vintage digital vibe.
Interesting how things come full circle. What about the specs? How much delay time could you actually get?
The functional specs were pretty remarkable for a compact pedal in '83. The delay range went from 12.5 milliseconds, good for like super short doubling effects, all the way up to 800 milliseconds.
Just under a second?
Yeah, nearly a full second. That 800 meters might seem limited now, but back then, for a compact unit, that was substantial. It made it absolutely perfect for the kind of rhythmic, syncopated guitar playing that was becoming huge in the 1980s.
Like infusion or synth pop, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Anything that demanded crisp, clearly defined echoes that didn't just dissolve into mud like some analog delays would at longer settings. The DD2 delivered that clarity.
But packing all that cutting-edge circuitry into a small box must have come with some practical downsides for the player, right? I seem to remember something about power.
Oh, it definitely did. The DD2 was, for its time, quite power-hungry. It required a fairly large current draw compared to typical analog pedals.
Which meant?
It meant you couldn't just daisy-chain it with everything else using a standard power supply of the day. It specifically needed the older BiOS ACA power adapter, which supplied a higher voltage that the pedal internally regulated down.
The ACA versus PSA adapter issue. A classic headache for vintage BOSS users.
Precisely. The fact that it required this specific kind of non-standard higher current power supply was a really clear signal that this wasn't just another fuzzbox. This was advanced, power-hungry digital technology crammed into the smallest possible package. But, despite those minor hassles,
The impact was huge.
immense. The historical impact just overshadowed those trade-offs. It effectively launched the entire BSS digital legacy, set the benchmark for what a digital delay pedal could be, and really changed the game.
So the DD2 arrives, it's revolutionary, it's based on studio tech, but it's maybe a bit expensive and has that tricky power requirement. How do you follow up an act like that?
Well, the classic business move, really. You maintain the core quality, the core sound that people loved, but you find ways to make it cheaper and easier to use. And that brings us directly to the DD3, introduced just a few years later in 1986.
The DD3. Okay, this one is truly iconic. Probably the delay pedal many people picture when you just say BSS delay.
Without a doubt. The DD3 essentially became the standard bearer. It replaced the DD2 in the lineup, but, and this is the crucial point, especially for the early versions, it was essentially electronically identical in its core function and sound.
Really? The same circuit?
Pretty much, yeah. BiOS was able to take advantage of advancements in manufacturing and especially the falling cost of the necessary memory chips to significantly lower the production cost.
Which meant a lower price for guitarists.
Exactly. Big drop in the retail price, making it much more accessible. And critically, they redesigned the power section. It now ran off the standard BiOS PSA adapter, the 9-volt regulated supply that became the industry standard.
Problem solved. Much more user-friendly on a typical pedal board.
Instantly. That change alone made a huge difference.
And the DD3's legacy is just incredible because of its sheer longevity, isn't it? It became one of the longest-running digital effects pedals in history.
Absolutely phenomenal run. It was in continuous production with some minor internal revisions over the years, but fundamentally the same pedal from 1986 all the way up until 2019.
33 years? That's insane for a piece of music tech.
It really is. For a whole generation, maybe even 2 generations of musicians, if you said digital delay, the default image in their head was almost certainly a DD3. It was just the digital delay for so long.
So it kept that foundational 12-bit PCM circuit.
Yes. Kept the 12-bit engine, kept that characteristic bright yet slightly textured sound.
And the same delay time range.
Same range, 12.5 milliseconds up to 800 milliseconds. It still offered those 3 fixed delay time ranges selected by the mode dial, 50 meters, 200 meters, and 800 meters max, plus that rather famous hold function.
Right, the hold function. I definitely want to spend a moment on that because that was a pretty unique feature for its time and defined how a lot of people used the DD3 creatively, didn't it?
It really did. It was a fascinating kind of artifact of early DSP capabilities. It's important to understand it wasn't a looper in the modern sense, not like a Ditto or an RC series pedal.
So what was it?
It was more like a rudimentary sampler or maybe a freeze effect. It was capable of capturing and continuously playing back whatever was in the delay memory buffer at the moment you stopped and held the pedal down.
And how long a snippet could it hold?
Well, it was limited by the maximum delay time, so about 800 milliseconds worth of audio. Just under a second.
Okay, so not long enough to loop a chord progression or anything?
No, definitely not for building song structures like modern loopers. But that short duration actually led to its specific creative uses. People would use it for these immediate short burst loop captures. You could say capture a single chord hit or a short melodic phrase and have it drone underneath while you soloed over it.
Like an instant static texture layer.
Exactly. Or you could use it to kind of maximize the density of a short slapback echo, making it sustain indefinitely for a moment. It was used for these quick textural additions, these momentary sonic events, rather than for composing layered parts. Really creative applications popped up.
So summing up the DD3, Its legacy is really defined by that incredible simplicity, that unique 12-bit bright but not sterile tone, and its absolutely legendary reliability, built like a tank.
Oh, yeah. You still see original DD3s on Pro boards today. They just work. And for countless players, that 800 meters maximum delay time wasn't really seen as a limitation back then. It was actually the ideal range for the kinds of sounds they needed. Quick slapback, rhythmic echoes for rock and pop.
It was the definition of set it and forget it delay.
Perfectly put. It just did its job, sounded good, and never broke. That's why it lasted over 3 decades as the standard.
Okay, so that era of 12-bit simplicity, dominated by the DD3, lasted for nearly a decade. But then we move into part 2. The mid-1990s hit, and music styles are changing, technology is accelerating.
Yeah, things are about to get a lot more complex.
This is the modern transition. The digital engine itself takes a massive leap forward, and features that we now consider absolutely essential, like tap tempo, finally make their way into the compact BOSS lineup.
And the pedal that marks this huge shift is the DD5, which came out in 1995. This represents the first really major architectural change in the core processing of the compact series since the original DD2.
We're talking light years ahead of that 12-bit processor from the DD2 and 3, right?
Oh, absolutely. A completely new engine. The DD5 introduced a significantly more powerful 32-bit DSP engine. And just as importantly, it paired that with 24-bit AD and DA converters.
Okay, let's break that down. 32-bit DSP, 24-bit conversion. What does that jump from 12-bit with companding to 24-bit conversion and 32-bit processing actually mean for the sound quality the guitarist hears?
It means a massive improvement in fidelity, basically. First, the 24-bit conversion provides an exponentially greater dynamic range than 12-bit. Way more steps to accurately represent the signal from quiet to loud. This immediately means you don't need tricks like companding anymore to fight the noise floor. The inherent noise floor of 24-bit is incredibly low.
So cleaner, quiet parts naturally.
Exactly. And the 32-bit DSP is likely 32-bit fixed-point processing at this stage, allowed for much more precise mathematical calculations when manipulating the audio signal. Adding effects, feedback, filtering, it could all be done with far greater accuracy.
So the digital picture of the guitar signal just became extremely high resolution, like going from standard def TV to HD.
That's a perfect analogy. The result was significantly cleaner, crisper, more transparent repeats. You got virtually zero signal degradation, even when you pushed the delay times out really long. This was the moment the compact digital delay truly became hi-fi.
Sounding like the expensive studio gear now.
Getting very, very close. It could genuinely rival some of the best studio units of the day in terms of pure audio quality, but now squeezed into that familiar Ball-S pedal format. A huge achievement.
And all that new processing power allowed for some crucial new features that became pretty much essential overnight, especially for players focused on rhythm.
2 main things stand out. First, the maximum delay time increased dramatically. The DD5 could go up to 2,000 milliseconds.
2 full seconds. That's a big jump from 800
A
meters.
huge jump. Opened up possibilities for much longer, more atmospheric delays. But the second feature, the really crucial one for the time, was tap tempo.
Tap tempo. The ability to tap your foot in time with the music and have the delay sync up perfectly.
Exactly. This was a feature previously found mostly on those big, expensive rack units. Bringing it to a compact pedal was revolutionary for live performance.
Though, as we should probably note, the DD5's implementation of tap tempo wasn't quite as elegant as we see today, was it? It had a slight catch.
That's right, it did.
Yeah.
To actually use the tap tempo feature on the DD5, you needed to plug an external, non-latching foot switch into a dedicated jack on the side of the pedal.
So you couldn't just tap the main pedal switch, you needed another pedal taking up space on your board just to tap the tempo in.
Correct. You had to sacrifice that simple single pedal footprint if you wanted perfectly synchronized delays.
Okay.
Bit clunky by modern standards, maybe.
But still, having the capability at all in that form factor was huge.
Absolutely. Despite the external switch requirement, the ability to precisely synchronize your delay time to the song's tempo was a massive deal for a compact pedal. The DD5 really cemented itself in the rigs of players who needed that kind of precision rhythmic echo.
You think of players like The Edge from U2, maybe, known for those intricate, dotted eighth-note delay patterns.
He's the classic example. The DD5, with its clean 32-bit engine and its tap tempo capability, was ideal for creating those kinds of precisely timed, layered guitar textures that became so influential. It allowed players to use that pristine digital clarity perfectly in sync with the rest of the band.
And beyond the tap tempo, did it add any other new modes or sounds compared to the DD3?
It did. Alongside the standard digital delay sound and the hold function, which is also extended thanks to the longer memory, the DD5 added the now popular reverse delay mode.
Ah, the psychedelic backwards tape sound.
Exactly. Gave it immediate textural versatility beyond just standard echoes. So yeah, the DD5 was a major leap. Higher fidelity, much longer delay times, tap tempo, albeit external, and reverse, a truly modern pedal for its time.
So the DD5 solves the fidelity issue, solves the timing issue, mostly, but it kind of creates this minor real estate problem with that external tap switch.
Huh?
The market, players, they clearly wanted that tap function integrated, right?
Oh, absolutely. That external switch was the main complaint you heard about the DD5, which leads us very logically to its successor, the DD6, which arrived in 2003.
Okay, the DD6, what's the story here? Building on the DD5?
Directly building on it, the DD6 used essentially the same powerful 32-bit DSP architecture as the DD5, so the core sound quality was similarly pristine and high fidelity. But the headline feature, it solved the biggest practical drawback of the DD5.
Integrated tap tempo.
Bingo. BOSS listened to the users. The DD6 integrated the tap tempo function right into the main pedal switch. No external foot switch needed anymore.
How did they manage that? Just tap the pedal?
It was done via a press and hold function. You'd hold the pedal switch down for a couple of seconds to enter tap tempo mode, then tap the tempo in, and then it would revert to on-off switching.
Ah, okay. Still maybe not quite as instant as a dedicated tap switch, but way more practical than needing a whole separate pedal.
Massively more practical for live use. Just having it on board made a huge difference to its usability.
And did the DSP improvements allow for even longer delay times again? Seems to be a trend.
It did stretch further still. The DD6 pushed the maximum delay time up to 5.2 seconds.
Over 5 seconds of clean digital delay. That's starting to get into serious ambient territory.
Absolutely. 5 full seconds of pristine echo. I mean, that was just unthinkable back in the DD2 days. But, the really defining feature of the DD6, the thing that people really remember it for, wasn't actually the extended range or the onboard tap. It was the introduction of a completely new mode called warp.
Warp mode. Okay, that sounds interesting. What did warp do? This wasn't just another flavor of echo, was it?
No, not at all. Warp mode was where the DD6 really started pushing beyond traditional delay effects and into active sound design territory.
How so?
When you selected warp mode, pressing and holding the pedal switch didn't just activate tap tempo. Instead, it did two things simultaneously. It dramatically increased the feedback level of the delay, pushing it towards infinite repeats, and it often ramped up the effect level as well.
So, instant self-oscillation and swells.
Exactly. It created this dense, almost immediate wash of sound. You could generate these huge, swelling, evolving ambient textures just by holding the pedal down. It took that super clean hi-fi digital delay engine and suddenly turned it into a tool for creating dynamic, evolving soundscapes on the fly.
That's a significant shift in philosophy for a delay pedal, isn't it? From just repeating the input signal to actively generating new textures.
It really was. It signaled that the DSP was now powerful enough and the designers were confident enough to not just repeat a signal accurately, but to start fundamentally manipulating and generating complex textures based on that signal and the pedal's controls. It was bridging the gap between delay and, say, a synth or a dedicated soundscape generator.
So DD6, onboard tap tempo, even longer delays, pristine sound, and this new creative warp mode for ambient exploration. Seems like a solid upgrade.
Definitely a very capable and popular pedal during its run. It really solidified that hi-fi digital sound as the standard for BOSS compacts in the mid-2000s.
Okay, following the DD6, we then arrive at the DD7 in 2008. Now, this is a model that many players, especially those who favor the compact format, often consider kind of the ultimate refinement, the synthesis of everything that came before it in that single pedal size, at least for that whole era before the current generation.
Yeah, the DD7 really did become the versatile standard for a long time, and still is for many. It felt like BOSS took the best bits of the DD5 and DD6, refined them, and then added some crucial new ingredients.
More delay time again. Let me guess.
You guessed it. The maximum delay time got another bump, extending up to 6.4 seconds in mono this time.
6.4 seconds. Okay, that's quite generous.
It's very generous for a compact pedal. But beyond just more time, the GD7 added some essential connectivity options that made it much more appealing to professional players or those with more complex setups.
Like what kind of connectivity?
Stereo input and output, that was a big one.
Ah, true stereo operation, not just stereo out from a mono in.
Exactly. True stereo I/O. This was huge for players running dual amplifier setups, using it in effects loops of stereo amps, or integrating it into, say, a wet-dry or wet-dry-wet rig for really immersive spatial effects.
Makes sense. What else?
It also added an input jack for an expression pedal.
Okay, expression control. What could you control with that?
You could assign the expression pedal to control various parameters in real time, typically delay time or delay feedback. So you could do smooth, pitch-bending warp effects by changing the delay time on the fly, or swell the number of repeats dynamically with your foot. Added a whole new layer of performance control.
Stereo I/O, expression control, definitely features aimed at more advanced users. But the really significant change in the DD7, the thing that set it apart from the DD5 and DD6, was perhaps a shift in tonal philosophy, wasn't it?
I'd say absolutely. Up until the DD7, pretty much every BAW-S digital delay since the original DD2 was fundamentally striving for ultimate pristine clarity. Higher fidelity, less noise, more accurate repeats. That was the goal.
I'm making it sound as close to the original signal as possible, just delayed.
Right. The DD7 was the first one in the compact line to sort of pause and say, wait a minute. Maybe perfect clarity isn't always what players want. Maybe they actually miss some of that old analog imperfection.
Acknowledging the lingering love for BBDs and maybe even tape echoes.
Precisely. So the DD7, while still having a standard super clean digital mode based on the previous engine, crucially introduced two highly sought-after alternative modes, analog and modulate.
Okay, let's dig into those. The analog mode, was this actual analog circuitry somehow crammed in there?
No, not at all. It was still fully digital. But BLS used the power of the 32-bit DSP engine to carefully simulate the characteristic behavior of a classic BBD analog delay circuit.
So digital modeling of analog flaws.
Exactly. It wasn't just EQing the repeats to sound darker. The programming made the digital repeats progressively lose high-end frequencies with each echo, introduced a bit of subtle musical saturation or grit as the feedback increased, and often added a touch of very gentle, random pitch modulation, all mimicking how a real BBD chip behaves as the signal degrades.
Trying to capture that warmth and decay digitally.
Yes, and it did a remarkably good job for its time. It gave players access to that much-loved, warmer, slightly degraded echo sound without needing an actual analog pedal.
And the modulate mode, what was that about?
The modulate mode took the clean digital delay repeats and added a clear chorus effect to them. So each echo would shimmer and swirl slightly.
Like the classic 80s rack delays often had a chorus built in.
Exactly that vibe. Great for thickening up lead tones, creating ethereal, atmospheric textures, or just adding a bit more movement and richness to the delays.
So this combination, the standard pristine digital, the warm analog simulation, the shimmering modulate, made the DD7 incredibly versatile tonally, didn't it?
Hugely versatile. Suddenly, this one compact pedal could deliver warm, vintage-style echoes suitable for classic rock or blues. It could do shimmering modulated repeats perfect for ambient or worship music, and it could still handle those crystal-clear, precise rhythmic delays needed for pop or fusion. Plus, you had reverse and the extended hold function. It covered a massive amount of ground.
Add in the stereo I/O and the expression control. You can see why it became the modern standard compact digital delay for so many players for such a long time. It offered incredible flexibility and power for its size.
It really did hit a sweet spot. And its primary limitation, really, despite all that power and versatility packed in there, was simply that it was still fundamentally a non-programmable pedal.
Meaning no presets.
Right. You couldn't save your perfectly dialed-in analog mode setting with tap tempo alongside your favorite long modulated shimmer setting. You were still twisting that mode dial and tweaking knobs manually every time you wanted to change sound significantly.
Which can be tricky in a live performance setting.
Definitely. Especially with all those modes packed onto one dial, it could get a bit fiddly. But for a huge number of players, the sheer range of sounds available outweighed that lack of presets.
Okay, that complexity versus convenience trade-off brings us neatly into part 3, the current culmination of the compact format. We're talking about the DD8, which represents the absolute maximum capability squeezed into that standard single-pedal BOSS enclosure today. And alongside it, a really fascinating recent development, a reboot of the classic DD3 tone, but with modern features.
Let's tackle the DD8 first. Released in 2019, this pedal really is the current pinnacle of the compact DD format. And it represents another significant technological leap, particularly in the core processing fidelity.
How so? We were already at 32-bit DSP with the DD567. What changed?
The type of 32-bit processing changed. The DD8 utilizes a 32-bit float DSP engine. This is actually a pretty critical distinction, moving beyond the 32-bit fixed-point processing used in the earlier models.
Okay, fixed point versus floating point. Why does the float part matter? What's the practical difference for a guitarist hearing the pedal?
Well, think of fixed-point math as having a fixed number of decimal places it can work with. It's very powerful, but it can sometimes run into limitations, especially when dealing with calculations involving extremely wide dynamic ranges, very, very quiet signals, alongside very, very loud signals happening simultaneously, like in complex feedback loops. You might get tiny rounding errors, or in extreme cases, digital clipping, if the signal level internally exceeds the fixed range.
Right.
Floating-point math is more like using scientific notation. It can dynamically allocate its precision where it's needed most. It handles vastly larger dynamic ranges much more gracefully and accurately.
So even less chance of digital noise or distortion, especially in complex scenarios.
Exactly. Floating point processing ensures the absolute highest possible fidelity, massive internal headroom, and incredibly accurate dynamic response.
Yeah.
It essentially eliminates any potential for digital clipping or subtle artifacts that might creep in during, say, really intense self-oscillating feedback or when stacking multiple complex processes. It delivers truly studio-ready, transparent clarity under any conditions.
Studio-ready clarity, and I'm guessing an astonishing delay range again.
Oh, yes. The trend continues. The DD8 pushes the maximum delay time up to a whopping 10 seconds in mono.
10 seconds? Good grief.
Or 6.4 seconds if you're running it in stereo, which it also supports, naturally. But yeah, 10 seconds is enough time to record a decent chunk of music.
And the number of modes, the DD7 had quite a few.
The number of modes absolutely exploded on the DD8.
Oh.
It is truly the chameleon delay of the compact line. It offers 10 distinct, detailed modes plus a dedicated looper function.
10 modes plus a looper. Okay, let's try and run through some of these because they really illustrate the full journey of the DD series over 40 years, all in one box. We've got the essentials covered, I assume.
Oh yeah, you've got your standard clean digital delay, you've got reverse, you've got modulate for the chorus repeats.
And then we see that commitment to modeling imperfection carried forward and expanded, right? Analog, tape, and now a warm mode. Are those three vintage simulations really necessary? Do they sound distinct?
They absolutely are distinct and arguably necessary if you want that level of tonal flexibility. They model different types of beloved analog imperfections. The analog mode, likely refined from the DD7, focuses specifically on simulating that BVD-style high-frequency roll-off and subtle modulation, that dark, chewy decay. The tape mode, on the other hand, is designed to emulate the characteristics of magnetic tape echo machines, like an Echoplex or a space echo. That means simulating things like tape saturation, a soft compression and harmonic richness, plus the characteristic wow and flutter, which is that slight pitch variation you get from physical tape transport inconsistencies. And also the specific way tape heads roll off high frequencies. It's a very different sonic flavor to BBD.
Right, tape has that warble.
Exactly. And then the new warm mode offers yet another flavor. It's generally a smoother, perhaps slightly compressed digital delay sound designed to sit nicely in a mix without being too sharp or attention-grabbing. Great for subtle ambience or thickening, where you don't want the pristine clarity of the standard mode or the specific artifacts of analog or tape.
So it's about giving you really fine control over the specific flavor of vintage vibe or degradation you want.
Precisely. It's nuanced control over the imperfection.
And then the DD8 ventures into some really interesting, maybe more experimental territory, doesn't it? Like the glitch mode and something called plus RV.
Yeah, glitch is pure sound design fuel. When you engage it, it triggers these rhythmic, sort of choppy, stuttering effects and unexpected digital skips and jumps based on your playing dynamics and the knob settings. It's perfect for adding modern electronic textures, experimental sounds, or just introducing some controlled chaos.
Fun for noisemakers.
Cool.
And plus RV delay plus reverb.
Exactly. Delay plus reverb. This is a brilliantly practical addition. It combines a digital delay with a complementary reverb effect in a single mode.
So you don't necessarily need a separate reverb pedal after it for ambient sounds.
Right. It immediately gives you these deep, spacious, atmospheric echo textures straight out of the box. It makes the DD8 an incredibly efficient tool for ambient players or anyone wanting that combined effect without using up more pedal board space. Very smart integration.
Okay, so add in warp mode carried over from the DD6 and the dedicated looper function with up to 40 seconds of recording time. The DD8 really seems to represent the culmination. It's got the highest fidelity 32-bit float processing, the massive delay range, and this incredible versatility to cover crystal clarity or dial in almost any specific lo-fi or vintage vibe you can think of.
It absolutely is the result of 40 years of digital delay evolution perfected into that single compact BRS format. But critically, it still retains that one core limitation inherent to the compact form factor.
Still no presets.
Still no presets. All that power, all those modes, but you're still selecting them manually via the knob and tweaking parameters by hand. No saving your favorite glitch setting alongside your perfect tape echo.
Which is exactly why the compact format coexists alongside the bigger programmable flagship line, different tools for different needs.
Perfectly put. But before we jump to the flagships, we absolutely have to talk about that other fascinating recent addition you mentioned, the DD3T, which came out in 2020.
Ah, yes, the DD3T. This one's intriguing because it seems like BOSS deliberately went backwards, in a way.
It's a fascinating strategy, really. It seems driven entirely by player demand and nostalgia for that original DD3 sound. The DD3T keeps the exact same core DSP engine and fundamental tone of the original 12-bit GD3.
So it sounds identical to the classic DD3, that bright, slightly grainy 12-bit sound.
Yes. Same characteristic repeats, same limited delay range, 12.5 milliseconds up to 800 milliseconds. Sonically, it is a vintage DD3. It's like they resurrected a historical artifact.
But they must have updated something, right? It's not just a reissue?
They updated the practical stuff, the usability aspects based on how people use pedals today. First, obviously, it handles modern standard PSA power adapters correctly. No more ACA hassle.
Okay, that's essential.
And second, and this is the crucial update, they integrated a dedicated tap tempo input jack.
Ah, so you can finally sync that classic DD3 sound to a modern tempo source.
Exactly. You need an external foot switch, similar to the old DD5, but the capability is there. And even better, the pedal includes a little switch to select tap tempo subdivisions, typically quarter notes or dotted eighths or triplets based on the tap.
So you get the vintage sound, but with modern rhythmic control.
Precisely. This feels like a direct acknowledgement from BIOSS that while that specific vintage 12-bit tone is highly desirable and have a unique character, lots of players love.
The modern guitarist, especially playing live or recording to a click, absolutely demands rhythmic precision. You might love the sound of 1986, but you need the timing control of 2020.
You've nailed it. The DD3T perfectly bridges that gap. It serves players who specifically want that classic 80s digital delay sound, not an emulation, the real deal, but need to be able to clock it perfectly to a drummer, a backing track, or their DAW. It really proves that the goal isn't always about achieving maximum fidelity or maximum features. Sometimes the goal is accurately replicating a beloved specific sonic character and just giving it the modern usability features it needs to stay relevant. A very cool move by BIOSS.
Okay, that covers the evolution within the compact format right up to today. Now, let's switch gears entirely and move into part 4, the flagship line. This is where BIOSS throws off the constraints of the small pedal format. We're talking bigger enclosures, more foot switches, and crucially, the features that advanced users crave. Presets, deep editing, and complex routing capabilities. Maximum power and programmability become the focus.
And the pedal that really laid the foundation for this whole flagship concept was the DD20 Giga Delay, released way back in 2003. This was BOSS's first major foray into that larger twin pedal format for a delay unit.
Right, the twin pedal series with 2 foot switches side by side.
Exactly. It was a clear acknowledgement that for more advanced delay users, the single foot switch and limited controls of the compact pedals just weren't enough anymore. They needed more real estate, more hands-free control, and critically, memory.
And they called it the Giga Delay. I assume that wasn't just marketing hype. It offered significantly more delay time.
Oh yeah, they weren't kidding. The DD20 immediately pushed the maximum available delay time way up to a massive 23 seconds.
23 seconds, that's almost half a minute.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That kind of time instantly brought it into the territory of dedicated looping devices, even though looping wasn't its primary function. It opened up enormous possibilities for creating long, evolving ambient textures, sound-on-sound layering.
Right.
Really serious sonic sculpting.
What was the tech under the hood? Was it similar to the compacts of that era, like the DD6?
It used high-quality 24-bit ADA converters, similar to the DD5 and DD6, ensuring excellent audio fidelity. And it was powered by a potent 32-bit DSP engine, again, likely fixed point at this time, but obviously coupled with much more memory capacity to handle that enormous delay time.
But the real game changer, the feature that truly established the flagship concept for BIOSS delays, was programmability, wasn't it?
That was absolutely the killer app. The DD20 offered 4 user-programmable preset slots, plus a 5th manual mode which just reflected the current knob settings.
4 presets doesn't sound like a lot now, but back in 2003 for a delay pedal.
It was a genuine game changer for live performance. Think about it. You could finally save completely different complex delay settings and recall them instantly with a foot switch. Maybe you have a smooth, long, analog-style ambient wash saved on preset 1. Then on preset 2, you have a sharp, rhythmic, tap-tempo synced ping-pong delay. Preset 3 could be a crazy reverse effect.
Being able to switch between those instantly mid-song without bending down to tweak knobs, huge advantage.
Massive. It made using complex delay setups live incredibly practical for the first time in a bias pedal format.
And did the modes on the DD20 reflect this more advanced user target? Were they more complex than the compact pedal modes?
They definitely were. The DD20 featured 10 distinct delay modes, plus the sound-on-sound looper. And yeah, several modes were specifically geared towards more complex textural effects favored by ambient, experimental, or progressive players.
Like what?
You had modes like Smooth, which offered a particularly lush, reverb-like delay. You had Warp and Twist, which allowed for really extreme feedback-driven manipulations and oscillations, kind of superpowered versions of the DD6's Warp. And importantly, it had dual and pan modes.
Dual delay, like running 2 delays at once.
Exactly. The dual mode allowed for setting up series or parallel short-long delay combinations for intricate rhythmic patterns. The pan mode created delays that automatically swept across the stereo field. These kinds of multi-voice stereo-focused effects really require substantial DSP power and are aimed squarely at players creating sophisticated soundscapes.
So the DD20 really laid down the blueprint for what a BDAS flagship delay should be. More time, more control, presets, and more complex creative algorithms.
Absolutely. For over a decade, from 2003 until it was eventually discontinued around 2015, the DD20 was the benchmark for an advanced, yet relatively user-friendly, programmable digital delay pedal. It really set the stage perfectly for what came next, the current generation of even more powerful flagship units.
Okay, which brings us right up to the present era, and to pedals that offer just an overwhelming amount of power and flexibility. The DD500 and its slightly smaller sibling, the DD200. Let's start with the absolute top of the mountain, the DD500 digital delay, which landed in 2015.
Right, the DD500. This machine is really the ultimate current manifestation of the entire BIOS delay legacy. It's less like a pedal and more like a genuine professional studio multi-effects processor that just happens to be housed in a rugged floor-based unit.
So the technology inside must be pretty serious. What are we talking about architecturally?
We're talking about truly top-tier, arguably future-proof specs. It uses the same kind of high-powered 32-bit float DSP engine found in the compact DD8, ensuring that incredible headroom and accuracy. But the DD500 runs its entire signal path, including the analog-to-digital and digital-to-analog conversion, at an incredibly high 96 kilohertz sample rate.
96 kilohertz. Okay, that's double the standard CD quality rate of 44.1 kilohertz, and higher even than the typical pro audio standard of 48 kilohertz. Why does a guitarist need that incredibly high sample rate in a delay pedal? What's the audible benefit?
It's about ensuring unparalleled clarity, transparency, and extremely accurate frequency response, especially when you're dealing with very complex sounds or stacking multiple effects. When you're running really long delay lines using intricate algorithms with lots of filtering or modulation, or combining delays with other effects internally, a lower sample rate can sometimes introduce subtle digital haze, or aliasing artifacts unwanted frequencies folding back down into the audible spectrum, particularly in the very highest frequencies above 15-18 kilohertz.
So artifacts that might make the effect sound slightly less natural or transparent compared to the dry signal.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Processing at 96 kilohertz effectively pushes any potential aliasing artifacts way, way up, far beyond the range of human hearing. It means that the delayed signal retains the full frequency content and dynamic nuance of your original guitar tone with absolute fidelity. The output tone, aside from the intended delay effect, is basically indistinguishable from your clean, unprocessed signal. It just adds the delay perfectly with zero tonal compromise. Ultimate transparency.
Okay, so top-tier processing. And the DD500 boasts, what, 12 distinct delay algorithms or modes? That seems like a lot to explore. Is this just more variations on tape and analog, or is there more complex stuff going on?
It's far beyond just variations. This is where the sheer power of the DD500's DSP really shines. Yes, you have your pristine standard digital delay. You have excellent emulations of vintage digital like the DD2, tape echo, and analog BBD delays. Then you get to some really complex and unique stuff. Well, you have the Terra Echo, which is derived from Bias's popular TE2 pedal. It's this incredibly spacious, swirling, highly modulated, almost reverb-like ambient effect. Very unique. You have SFX modes, which offer specialized sounds like filter delays, bit crush delays, and other more out there effects. But the most significant modes, the ones that really leverage the DD500's architecture, are probably the dual and pattern modes.
Right, you mentioned dual modes on the DD20. Does the DD500 take that concept further?
Oh, much further. Because the DD500's primary power feature is that it contains two completely independent, high-power delay engines running simultaneously within the pedal.
Two separate delays in one box.
Exactly. Two full-featured delay processors.
Yeah.
And you can route them in various ways, in series, in parallel, or in specialized A/B configurations where they process different parts of the signal or switch between each other.
So in a series setup.
The output of the first delay engine feeds into the input of the second one. This allows you to create incredibly complex, cascading rhythmic textures, maybe a short slapback feeding to a long modulated delay, for example.
And in parallel.
Both delay engines process your clean guitar signal simultaneously, and their outputs are mixed together. This is fantastic for creating huge, wide stereo delay spreads, maybe with different delay times or characters panned left and right.
That level of routing complexity, it's like having two high-end delay pedals inside one enclosure that you can configure however you want.
That's exactly what it is. You could, in theory, set up engine A to sound like a DD8 in tape mode and engine B to sound like a DD8 in analog mode and run them in parallel stereo. The possibilities are immense. The pattern mode also uses both engines to create complex, multi-tap rhythmic sequences with up to 16 taps.
Wow. Okay, so dual engines, 96 kilohertz processing. What about control and memory?
Full MIDI input and output is crucial here. You can synchronize the DD500's tempo perfectly to external sequencers, drum machines, or DAWs. You can control almost any parameter via MIDI CC messages and switch presets remotely. There's also a dedicated USB port for connecting to a computer, allowing you to use BioSS's editor librarian software for really deep diving into parameters and managing presets.
And how many presets can it store? The DD20 had 4.
The DD500, it can store up to 297 user presets, plus the manual setting, effectively nearly 300 memory patches.
300. Okay, that's borderline excessive, maybe.
It's certainly comprehensive. It means you can craft and save an enormous library of sounds for every possible musical scenario. The DD500 is truly designed to be a centerpiece for a professional guitar rig, capable of handling literally everything from the most precise, studio-clean, synchronous rhythmic patterns to the lushest, most complex, customized ambient soundscapes imaginable.
The trade-off, of course, has to be the complexity, right? And the physical size. It's a big pedal.
Absolutely. It demands a significant chunk of pedal board real estate. And unlocking all that power, managing those 300 patches, configuring the dual engines and deep routing options, it definitely requires a commitment to reading the manual and potentially involves some menu diving on the pedal's LCD screen or using the computer editor. There's a learning curve involved to get the most out of it.
Which is probably why BioSS introduced the perfect bridge unit, sitting between the ultimate power of the DD500 and the relative simplicity of the compact DD8. You mentioned the DD200 digital delay.
Exactly. The DD200, which came out in 2019 alongside the rest of the 200 series pedals, is designed to solve that exact dilemma. How do you get flagship-level sound quality and powerful features, but in a more manageable, intuitive package?
So what's the core idea? Does it use the same high-end tech as the 500?
Yes, that's the key. The DD200 takes the essential sonic foundation of the flagship, that same powerful 32-bit float DSP engine and that pristine 96 kilohertz internal processing, but houses it in the smaller, more pedal board-friendly 200 series form factor. It's roughly half the size of the DD500, with fewer knobs and a simpler interface.
So same sound quality, smaller box, easier controls. What's the compromise? Fewer features, fewer presets.
It's essentially a carefully curated selection of the DD500's capabilities, focusing on practicality and usability. It retains 12 versatile and powerful delay types, including many of the advanced modes like Echo, Shimmer, Pattern, Dual, and excellent analog tape emulations. So you still get a huge sonic palette.
And presets, does it have memory?
It does. It offers 128 user preset memories, plus the manual setting. Still a very generous amount, more than enough for most players' needs, but perhaps less daunting than the DD500's 300.
What about MIDI and other connections?
It includes basic MIDI support via space-saving TRS MIDI jacks, allowing for external tempo sync and preset switching, which is great. It also has stereo I/O and support for external foot switches or an expression pedal, so connectivity is still very strong.
So the DD200 really does sound like the perfect bridge. It gives you that top-tier, professional-grade sound quality and access to many of the advanced algorithms from the flagship line,
but with a much more streamlined, hands-on control interface. Fewer menus, more direct knob control. It's far more intuitive for players who want deep sounds, but maybe hate extensive menu diving or don't need the absolute complexity of dual-engine routing.
It makes that high-end tech accessible without demanding, as you put it earlier, a PhD in digital routing.
Exactly. It hits that sweet spot between the feature-packed but presetless compact DD8 and the incredibly powerful but potentially overwhelming DD500. It allows players to get truly professional-grade delay sounds and flexibility in a size and format that fits neatly onto virtually any standard pedal board. A really smart product in the lineup.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize this incredible 40-year story of the BioSS DD series as we head towards the outro. We've covered a lot of ground, from 12 bits to 32-bit float. What are the key takeaways for you, the listener, from this whole journey?
Well, I think the overall narrative, the big picture, is definitely one of continually relentlessly maximizing processing power, but doing so within increasingly constrained or perhaps deliberately chosen physical form factors. And we can probably break down the entire history of the DD series into three major technological leaps that really transform not just BLSS pedals, but the whole industry.
Okay, leap number one.
Has to be the beginning. That initial leap to 12-bit digital processing using clever companding with the DD2 back in 1983. That was the moment. High-end, clean studio delay technology was successfully miniaturized and made available to everyday musicians. It literally launched the compact digital effects era.
Right, the genesis moment. What's leap number two?
That would be the monumental shift around 1995 with the DD5 to significantly more powerful 32-bit fixed-point DSP and clean 24-bit 88 conversion. This leap enabled much longer delay times 2 full seconds, delivered truly pristine, high-fidelity repeats, and perhaps most critically for practical use, integrated tap tempo into the compact format, defining the modern clock-synchronized digital delay.
Okay, the hi-fi and tap tempo revolution, and the third major leap.
That's the current era. The adoption of ultra-high-resolution 32-bit float DSP engines, often coupled with high sample rates like 96 kilohertz, starting with the flagship DD500 and now also found on the DD200 and even the compact DD8. This leap represents achieving essentially perfect audio fidelity, massive headroom, and the power to run incredibly complex algorithms, including dual engines and sophisticated modeling.
So with pretty much every major iteration, BOSS managed to deliver exponentially more delay range, more features, more sonic options, and higher core audio fidelity.
Exactly. It's a story of constant technological refinement and expansion of capabilities within those specific formats: compact, twin pedal, flagship.
And this stunning progression, this relentless pursuit of higher fidelity and more power, leads us to a really fascinating kind of philosophical point about digital effects today, doesn't it?
It really does. The evolution clearly shows that even as the core audio fidelity reached what you could arguably call studio clean or perfect transparency, pretty much achieved with that 32-bit float. 96 kilohertz processing, the focus of development, didn't just stop there. It didn't end with achieving perfect clarity.
In fact, the focus seemed to shift quite dramatically, didn't it? Towards deliberately modeling imperfection.
Precisely. That's the fascinating paradox. If maximum clarity and perfect replication of the input signal is the ultimate technological goal, why would you then dedicate precious DSP resources and development time into perfecting analog modes that roll off highs, tape modes that warble and saturate, and warm modes that smooth things out? Why put those in your highest fidelity pedals like the DD8, DD200, or DD500?
Because perfect clarity isn't always the most musically useful or desirable sound.
I think that's exactly it. Maximum clarity is often less musically interesting, less inspiring, than subtle, intentional phonic coloration or character. The market musicians, we demand tone, and tone often requires or is enhanced by certain kinds of imperfection. So the tech reached perfection and then was immediately used to recreate imperfection beautifully.
And at the same time that they focused on modeling imperfection, the focus also shifted towards modeling or enabling complexity, right?
Yes. That's the other side of the coin. That's where features like the dual and pattern engines and the flagship units come in. The immense DSP power isn't just used for fidelity or vintage emulation. It's used to create entirely new, complex, rhythmic architectures and layered soundscapes that were previously impossible outside of a sophisticated computer DAW setup.
So the challenge for the future of digital delay, it seems, is perhaps no longer about achieving better clarity. We're arguably there. The challenge now is managing the almost limitless potential for sound design and sonic manipulation that's now contained within even a relatively compact modern digital effects pedal.
I agree. When a single compact pedal like the DD8 can genuinely be a chameleon delay, capable of convincingly covering the sounds and needs of a guitarist from 1983, 1995, and 2025 all at the same time, that's an incredible amount of power at your feet.
Which really leaves the ultimate question, the final provocative thought for you, the listener, to ponder and explore in your own music and your own rig.
Yeah, what do you actually need or want from a delay? Is the legendary simplicity, the undeniable reliability, and that unique, characterful 12-bit tone of the classic DD3, now available again with tap tempo in the DD3T, is that still the ultimate standard for you? Is that quick, reliable, characterful echo all you really need?
Or do you need the deep dual-engine programmability, the pristine 96 kilohertz fidelity, the complex routing options, and the potential 300 presets of something like the DD500 to truly realize your creative sonic vision? Maybe the answer lies somewhere in between with the DD8 or the DD200.
The amazing thing about the BA-SS DD series, after this 40-year journey, is that it genuinely offers all of those options, from authentic historical tone right through to almost limitless modern power. The choice, ultimately, is yours. Which path do you take? Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a subject, dig into the sources, and try to give you the full picture, maybe with a few surprises along the way. Today, we're doing something really cool, I think. A deep dive into digital sound history, basically. We're tracing the family tree of the BOSS RV Reverb pedals.
That's right.
From way back in 1987, right up to today's, powerhouse models. And it's more than just guitar pedals, isn't it? It's really a story about technology. How studio magic, stuff that filled racks, got shrunk down into these little stomp boxes everyone could afford.
Exactly. And our mission here is to track that whole journey. How did they do it? How did the tech evolve?
Okay, so let's set the scene first.
Yeah.
Before 1987, what was the deal with reverb?
Well, it's crucial to get this context. If you wanted really good reverb, professional quality, you weren't looking at pedals at all. You were looking at rack mount units, big ones. Think about things like Roland's SDE 3000 or maybe the RV10. These were studio staples.
Huge, heavy things, right? And probably cost a bomb.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking 2, maybe 3 rack spaces, heavy. Definitely not cheap. I mean, for a lot of musicians back then, buying one of those was like buying a used car.
Wow.
Seriously. They needed special power, careful handling. They belonged in studios, not really on a stage floor getting kicked around. So the idea that you could get that kind of complex digital ambience, that sound quality,
Right.
and cram it into a standard BAW-SS pedal, a little metal box.
That must have seemed impossible, like science fiction almost.
Pretty much. It was a massive engineering challenge. How do you get those complex algorithms, the math behind the reverb decay, onto tiny little chips? That was one thing.
And then powering it. You mentioned the power draw later.
Right. That's the
Yeah.
other side. How do you make it efficient enough to run off a standard power supply or even a battery? It was a real uphill battle against physics, basically. Size and power.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start right there. At the moment they cracked it, 1987.
So the RV2 digital reverb, it lands in 1987. And it's not just like another pedal. It's foundational. Our sources are really clear on this. It was the first compact digital reverb pedal ever. Full stop.
So not just BSS's first, but the industry's first.
Exactly. This wasn't just improving something, it was creating a whole new category. It basically laid down the tracks for every ambient pedal that followed.
And that pioneer status, it comes from BSS, taking Roland's know-how, those rack algorithms, and somehow figuring out how to translate them into that familiar compact pedal shape.
That's the core of it. It set the sonic signature, the DNA, for the whole RV line. And frankly, it put everyone else on notice. They had to play catch up.
Okay, let's get into the tech a bit. What was under the hood? You mentioned algorithms.
Right. So the RV2 ran on a 16-bit digital reverb engine. Now, 16-bit fixed point processing, that was pretty cutting edge for a compact pedal back then.
But 16-bit, that sounds, dated now. What'd that mean for the sound?
It absolutely meant limitations. Compared to today's 24 or 32-bit systems, 16-bit has less resolution, less dynamic range.
And that's where that grainy or gritty description comes from, isn't it? I've heard people describe the RV2 like that.
Precisely. It's something called quantization noise. Basically, the digital system has fewer steps to represent the sound. Especially when the sound gets quiet, like a reverb tail fading out, the processor sort of runs out of steps. You hear this digital fizz almost, a little bit of grit.
But that wasn't necessarily seen as bad back then.
Not at all. It became part of its character. That slightly grainy texture is like the sound of late 80s digital tech.
Yeah.
It has a certain charm and musicality to it. It's why vintage digital stuff is still sought after.
Okay, so Limitations, yes, but also versatility for the time. What could it actually do?
Yeah, for 1987, it was incredibly versatile. You got 8 modes in total, 6 core reverb types. Room, hall, plate, staples even now.
Right.
Plus gate reverb, reverse reverb, which was pretty wild back then, and a really useful delay plus reverb combo mode.
And the controls were pretty standard BOSS fare.
Yep. Effect level, pre-delay, time. Simple, but they gave guitarists the kind of control over space that you usually only got at a mixing desk.
Now, you mentioned power earlier. This is the infamous ACA adapter era, right?
Yes, the power challenge. This is a big deal historically. That 16-bit engine was thirsty. It drew a lot of current for the time,
Yeah.
which meant you had to use the BISS ACA adapter, not the modern PSA ones everyone uses now.
Explain that difference, because it trips people up even today with vintage pedals. Why ACA?
Okay, so the ACA adapter gave out an unregulated voltage, usually around 12 volts DC, maybe a bit higher. The pedal itself had circuitry inside to drop that down to the 9 volts it actually needed.
Right.
If you plugged in a modern regulated 9-volt adapter, like a PSA type, the pedal just wouldn't get enough juice. The LED would be dim, the sound weak, the reverb maybe wouldn't even work properly.
Because it was expecting that higher voltage to regulate down from?
Exactly. It needed that headroom. So needing that specific kind of awkward adapter and drawing that much power, it shows you how hard they were pushing the technology available at the time. They were right at the edge.
But the payoff was worth it.
Absolutely. The sound was spacious. It was lush. It really did give those expensive rack units a run for their money, even with that bit of digital grain. So even though the RV2 wasn't around for that long, only 87 to 89, it did exactly what it set out to do. It proved compact digital reverb was possible. It set a new standard.
Okay, so the RV2 breaks the barrier. Digital reverb and a pedal. Done. But then fast forward a few years to 1994 and we get the RV3. And this one seems like a shift in thinking.
It really was. The RV2 proved the concept. The RV3, you could argue, perfected the utility for a lot of players at the time.
How so? What was the big change?
It became the ambient combo, as you put it earlier. The OSS merged 2 absolutely essential effects, digital delay and digital reverb, all in one stereo pedal.
Ah, okay. So instead of just reverb, it's reverb plus delay.
Exactly. And this was incredibly smart. Think about the music evolving, then grunge was huge, but also things like shoegaze, early post-rock. Musicians were starting to layer textures like crazy. Delay into reverb was becoming a fundamental sound.
And putting them in one box just made sense. Less clutter, simpler setup.
Totally. And that practicality, combined with the sound, is what really launched the RV3 into, well, it became a cult classic. Still is, really.
Yeah, our sources definitely point to its significance. You see it linked with some pretty major artists, especially those known for textural guitar work, like Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead. That's a name that pops up a lot with the RV3.
Oh, absolutely. Greenwood's use of it is iconic. He used a ton of gear, obviously, but the RV3 was often there providing that integrated wash of delay and reverb. You hear it on those big ambient swells or adding that ethereal quality to clean, arpeggiated parts. For a long time, especially in post-rock and more experimental stuff, the RV3 was kind of the secret sauce for getting those dense layered sounds without needing, 5 separate pedals.
So what was the tech inside? Still 16-bit.
Yeah, architecturally, it was still built on a 16-bit DSP foundation, similar to the RV2 in principle, but it was definitely an updated system. They essentially took refined reverb algorithms cleaner than the RV2's and combined them with the digital delay engine from another BOSS classic, the DD5 digital delay.
So cross-pollinating their own successful designs.
Smart.
Very smart. Yeah. And the flexibility this offered was huge. Let's look at the modes. You got 4 modes that were just pure reverb. Then you got 3 modes that were just delayed, so it could double as a standalone delay pedal, which is cool.
Right.
And then the main event. 4 different modes that combine delay and reverb in various ways. Yep. That's where the magic really happened for a lot of people.
And the delay side wasn't just some basic echo, was it? I remember the DD5 delay times were pretty impressive.
They were. The RV3 inherited that capability. You could get up to 2,000 milliseconds of delay time. That's 2 full seconds.
Wow, 2 seconds. That's massive for layering, creating rhythmic patterns that wash into the reverb. Exactly. It made it super versatile for creating those evolving soundscapes. For players wanting a powerful but simple setup, it was kind of perfect.
And connectivity took a step up too, right?
Yeah.
Stereo.
Huge step up. Full stereo inputs and outputs. By '94, stereo rigs were becoming much more common, especially for players using effects for ambience, running 2 amps for a wider soundstage.
Yeah, that big spatial sound.
The RV3 slotted right into that perfectly. It could handle the stereo image, letting the delay and reverb spread out beautifully. That cemented its place in more complex rigs.
Okay, what about the tone itself? If it's still 16-bit, did it have that same graininess as the RV2?
Less so, actually. While still 16-bit, the algorithms and processing were refined. The RV3 sounds noticeably cleaner, maybe a bit brighter than the RV2. It's known for having really smooth digital tails. That clarity was perfect for those big, pristine, almost shimmering washes that were becoming popular in the 90s.
So cleaner, smoother, less vintage digital grit, more refined.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Which also opened up other uses. People used it for subtle doubling effects, short delay mixed with reverb to make the guitar sound thicker, and just simplifying rigs, as we said.
It really feels like the RV3's success wasn't just about pushing the tech envelope like the RV2, but about hitting this perfect sweet spot of utility and sound quality for the time.
I think that's spot on. What's fascinating is how that focus on practical combination, that simplicity almost, led to it being so beloved. It became this reliable workhorse, and its influence is clear. It proved how much players valued having quality delay and reverb in one place. BISS definitely took note of that for future designs.
Okay, so the RV3 nails the combo pedal concept and becomes a cult classic. Then we jump to 2002 and the RV5 arrives. And this feels like another major shift. BSF actually drops the delay part, right?
They did, yeah. The RV5 represented a deliberate refocus back onto pure reverb quality. It was a statement, really.
That seems like a bold move given how popular the RV3's combo design was. Why go back to reverb only?
Well, technology had moved on significantly by the early 2000s. Digital processing was getting much more powerful and cheaper. BOS likely saw an opportunity to make a big leap in fidelity. Instead of splitting the processing power between delay and reverb, they decided to dedicate everything to making the best possible compact reverb they could at that time.
Was there pushback? Did people miss the delay?
Maybe initially for some RV3 fans, but honestly, the jump in sound quality with the RV5 was so noticeable that it quickly won people over. This was a serious upgrade.
Okay, so what was the big tech leap? You mentioned fidelity.
This is where we move beyond 16-bit. The RV5 introduced 24-bit ADA converters, analog to digital and digital to analog, and crucially, 32-bit DSP, digital signal processing.
Right, let's break that down. 24-bit conversion versus 16-bit. What does that actually mean for the sound the guitarist hears?
It means a huge increase in dynamic range and resolution. Think of it like pixel count in a digital image. 16-bit gives you about 96 decibels of dynamic range. 24-bit pushes that up to over 144 dB.
That sounds like a massive difference.
It is. In practical terms, it means a much lower noise floor, less hiss, significantly more headroom, so the signal is less likely to clip or distort internally, and just overall, a much cleaner, clearer, more transparent signal path. That vintage digital graininess we talked about with the RV2, gone. This was moving into the realm of pro audio fidelity.
And the 32-bit DSP, that handles the actual reverb calculations.
Exactly. More processing power means you can run more complex, more realistic, smoother sounding reverb algorithms. The combination of 24-bit conversion and 32-bit processing was the key to the RV5's high fidelity sound.
So built for hi-fi from the ground up. What about the reverb types? Did they keep the classics?
They did. You still had your essential spring, plate, hall, room, and gate reverbs. But the RV5's lasting legacy, the thing everyone remembers it for, is one specific mode: modulate.
Ah, the modulate mode. That one gets talked about a lot. What made it so special?
It was this dedicated algorithm that subtly blended a chorus or vibrato effect into the reverb trails. It wasn't just reverb, it was reverb with movement, with texture. It created this incredibly thick, swirling, almost ethereal wash of sound. It sounded expensive, lush. It gave the reverb this sense of depth and motion that was really captivating.
And that sound just took off, didn't it? Became the sound for ambient guitar for years.
Absolutely. Throughout the 2000s, if you heard that kind of shimmery, modulated, atmospheric swell on a guitar track, odds are it might have been an RV5. It became a modern classic almost instantly.
So the overall tone was smooth, hi-fi, precise.
Yeah, very articulate. It finally delivered on that promise of getting studio-quality smoothness into a compact pedal, something the RV2 hinted at but couldn't quite achieve due to the tech limitations back then.
And the uses shifted more towards that ambient sound design.
Definitely. While the standard reverbs like spring and plate were much improved thanks to the better conversion, the RV5's reputation really rests on those huge, evolving soundscapes you could get with the modulate mode. Perfect for stereo rigs, too, giving this crystal clear spatial image.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. The RV2 was about just getting digital reverb in a pedal. The RV5 seems like it was about the how mastering a specific type of sound, that modulated wash, and doing it with incredible clarity.
That's a great way to put it. It wasn't just a tech upgrade, it was a sonic statement. It showed that miniaturization didn't have to mean compromise anymore. With 32-bit processing doing the heavy lifting and 24-bit conversion keeping the signal clean, the RV5 was genuinely competing with rack effects that cost way more. It set a new benchmark for what a compact reverb could sound like.
All right, so the RV5 sets this high-fidelity standard, particularly with that modulate sound. Then we jump another decade or so to 2015, and the RV6 arrives. What's the story here? Building on the RV5.
Pretty much, yeah. The RV6 takes that high-fidelity foundation laid by the RV5 and just cranks everything up a notch. More versatility, more algorithms, more precision. This is really where BOSS seems to have consolidated all their learnings.
So another tech leap involved. What changed under the hood this time?
A couple of really significant things. First, the processing got another upgrade. It's still 32-bit DSP, but now it's 32-bit floating point DSP, and the sampling rate jumped up to 96 kilohertz.
Okay, floating point. That sounds important. Why does that matter compared to the fixed point DSP in the RV5?
It's all about how the processor handles the complex math involved in creating reverb. Fixed point math is efficient, but it has limitations in how much dynamic range it can handle internally. If you push it really hard with complex algorithms or loud signals, it can run out of room mathematically and cause digital clipping masty distortion.
So it can overload internally.
Exactly. Floating point math is much more flexible. It can dynamically allocate resources to handle a much wider range of numbers, both very large and very small. What that means for the user is that even with really dense, complex reverb algorithms, or when you stack effects, the processor is far less likely to clip or create harsh artifacts. It maintains clarity and dynamic range much better, especially at extreme settings. That's why the RV6 sounds so smooth and, well, dynamic.
And the 96 kilohertz sampling rate. Higher resolution capture.
Higher resolution capture and processing, yeah. It allows for more detail in the high frequencies and potentially even smoother reverb tails. It's another step towards pristine audio quality.
They also added some key hardware features too, didn't they? Stuff players were asking for.
Two big ones, an expression pedal input, which is huge. It lets you control parameters like decay time, effect level, maybe modulation depth in real time with your foot. Adds a whole new layer of performance control.
Definitely. And the other?
Analog drive-through. This is a critical detail for tone purists.
Explain that. Why is analog drive-through so important?
Okay, in many digital pedals, when the effect is on, your entire guitar signal, the dry sound, plus the effect gets converted to digital, processed, and then converted back to analog.
Right. AD, then DA conversion.
That conversion process, even with good converters, can introduce tiny amounts of latency and potentially subtly alter the core tone of your guitar and amp. Some players are very sensitive to this.
They want their fundamental sound untouched.
Precisely. Analog drive-through means your original, unprocessed analog guitar signal passes straight through the pedal from input to output, completely untouched by the digital circuitry. The digital reverb effect is then created in parallel and mixed back in with the pure analog dry signal. So you get the reverb, but your core tone stays intact, immediate, and latency-free. It's a hallmark of high-quality modern pedal design.
Makes sense. Okay, what about the sounds, new modes?
Yeah, this is where the versatility really shines. They kept the essentials: room, hall, plate, spring, and of course the beloved modulate mode, probably refined again. But then they added some really cool new ones. There's dynamic mode, which is really interesting. The intensity or bloom of the reverb actually reacts to how hard you play. Play softly, subtle reverb, dig in, and it swells up.
Ooh, that sounds very musical.
Very. Then there's shimmer. This one became instantly popular.
Sure, right. That's the one with the octave up effect blended in. Creates those angelic synth pad-like tails.
That's the one. It adds pitch-shifted harmonies, usually octaves, into the reverb's feedback loop. It creates these evolving, rising textures that sound huge and ethereal, massive in worship music, cinematic stuff, ambient genres.
And anything else?
And interestingly, they brought back a dedicated delay plus reverb mode, a nod to the old RV3's popularity, acknowledging that people still really want that convenient combo sometimes.
So tonally, we're talking rich, smooth, very dynamic, very clean, thanks to the floating point processing and analog dry-through.
Exactly. It can do subtle room sounds convincingly, classic spring drip, epic modulated washes, crazy shimmer pads. It covers a huge amount of ground. Our sources really highlight how the RV6 kind of perfectly blended that desire for analog, feel the immediacy of the drive-through with the power and precision of cutting-edge digital processing. It just became the go-to, reliable, versatile, compact reverb for tons of players. Still a bestseller today.
Okay, so the RV6 seems like the ultimate evolution of the compact reverb pedal. But BSS didn't stop there. In 2017, they released the RV500, and this looks like a different beast altogether.
Oh, it absolutely is. If the RV6 perfected the compact format, the RV500 is BSS saying, okay, let's take the gloves off, let's make a no-compromise studio-grade reverb processor, but put it in a pedal format.
It's described as the pinnacle of their reverb development. This isn't just a stomp box anymore, is it?
Not really. It's a deep, powerful sound design tool. It's competing directly with high-end rack mount units and sophisticated software plugins. The core specs are top tier. 32-bit floating point DSP, 96 kilohertz sampling rate, high-quality ADA conversion, similar to the RV6 in quality, but there's just more processing power under the hood, a lot more.
And the key difference physically, besides the bigger size and more knobs, is the architecture, right? It's a dual-engine processor. What does that mean?
It means it has two completely independent reverb processors running inside it. Think of it like having two separate high-end reverb pedals in one box.
Two at once. How does that work?
It opens up incredible flexibility. You can run two different reverb algorithms simultaneously, maybe a short plate on one engine and a long shimmer on the other. And crucially, you can choose how those two engines interact. There are different routing options.
Okay, like what?
You can run them in parallel. Your dry guitar signal goes in, and it feeds both reverb engines independently. Their outputs are then mixed together, so you layer two distinct reverbs on top of your dry sound.
Got it. Layering. What else?
You can run them in serial. This means the output of Reverb Engine A feeds into the input of Reverb Engine B.
Ah, so you process the reverb itself.
Exactly. You could have, say, a room reverb going into a hall reverb to create an incredibly complex, dense space. Or maybe a spring reverb feeding into a modulate reverb. You're processing the effect with another effect.
That sounds seriously deep. Any other routing?
There's also an A-B split mode, which is great for stereo rigs. You could send reverb A to your left amp and a completely different reverb B to your right amp. Or even switch between two entirely different reverb sounds instantly.
Wow, okay, that's moving way beyond just adding ambience. That sounds sculpting.
Totally. And the list of available algorithms reflects that depth. It's not just the standard 6 or 8 anymore. The RV500 has 12 distinct reverb algorithms built in. You get incredible emulations of room, hall, plate, spring. The shimmer and modulate modes are there, of course, but also really specialized stuff. Things like fast decay reverb, nonlinear reverb, like gated sounds but more complex, an early reflection algorithm.
Early reflection, what's that for?
That lets you focus just on the very first sound reflections that define the size and shape of a virtual space before the main reverb tail washes in. It's a level of detail usually found only in very high-end studio processors or plugins. Allows for incredibly precise placement of the sound in a mix.
And there are SFX modes too.
Yeah, modes designed for more overtly effecty sounds, pushing beyond traditional reverb. Plus dedicated algorithms from classic Roland rack units like the SRV-2000 and even the RE-201 Space Echoes reverb.
So a huge palette of sounds, and the control must be pretty extensive to manage all that.
Oh yeah. This is not a plug-and-play pedal in the same way the compacts are. You've got deep editing menus accessible via the display and knobs or more easily via USB connection to a computer editor. Massive memory storage, 297 user patches you can save. Full MIDI input and output, so you can control it from external sequencers or controllers or sync it with other MIDI gear. Expression pedal input, assignable controls. It's built for integration into complex systems.
And the sound quality itself, we're talking top tier.
Absolutely. Studio-grade clarity, immense depth, incredible detail in the reverb tails. Because of the dual engine and the floating point processing, you can create incredibly dense and complex reverb textures that still sound clean and articulate. It's kind of the ultimate irony, isn't it? The very first RV pedal, the RV2, was revolutionary because it tried to shrink down the sound of those 80s rack units.
Right.
And now, the RV500, the descendant, offers processing power and algorithmic complexity that genuinely surpasses most of those classic rack units it originally aimed to emulate. It puts that level of studio power right on your pedal board.
So who is this for? Pro studios. Touring musicians with complex rigs.
Pretty much, it's for people doing advanced sound design, composers, players who need intricate layered reverbs, maybe running stereo or wet rigs. It's huge in the worship guitar world, film scoring, anywhere you need that high fidelity, super flexible, programmable reverb. It really is the culmination of that whole journey that started back in '87. Hashtag tag outros.
Wow. Okay, that's quite a journey. From a grainy 16-bit box fighting power issues to a dual-engine 32-bit floating point monster. If we kind of zoom out and look at the whole RV series, it really is like a miniature history of digital audio tech itself, isn't it?
It really is. You can see the key technological milestones marked by each generation of pedal.
So let's quickly recap those big steps. We kicked off with the RV2 in 1987. Groundbreaking stuff. 16-bit processing, the first compact digital reverb, its legacy, historic innovation, even with that characteristic gritty sound.
Then the RV3 in 1994, still 16-bit, but it nailed that reverb plus delay combo, became a cult classic because it was just so useful, especially for those emerging ambient and post-rock sounds.
Right. Then the big fidelity jump in 2002 with the RV5, that crucial move to 24-bit conversion and 32-bit processing. And its defining sound, that lush modulate mode, became the modern ambient staple for a whole generation.
Followed by the RV6 in 2015. Upping the game again with 32-bit floating point processing, adding analog drive-through for signal purity, and giving us those versatile new modes like dynamic and the super popular shimmer, probably the most versatile compact reverb by SS has made.
And finally, the RV500 in 2017, taking all that tech 32-bit float, 96K sampling, but packing it into a dual-engine, MIDI-controllable, deep editing powerhouse. It's the flagship processor, moving beyond just being a pedal.
Yeah, looking across those models, you see nearly 4 decades of effort in mastering digital ambience, from trying to realistically capture a space with early limited tech to creating these incredibly rich, dynamic, programmable sonic worlds that go way beyond realism.
It's a perfect case study in how technology doesn't just improve, it actually enables new forms of musical expression.
Absolutely. The tools shape the art.
So what does this all mean? For someone listening, maybe trying to choose a reverb or just understand this history, what's the takeaway?
Well, I think the journey itself is fascinating, seeing how they wrestled with those early limitations, like the RV2's power draw, literally fighting physics to make the sound happen compared to the sheer effortless processing power of something like the RV500. It really shows this relentless drive in engineering, the drive to take complex, expensive studio technology and make it smaller, more accessible, more powerful, giving creative tools to more people.
Right.
But here's maybe a final thought to chew on, something provocative, perhaps. Each step in this evolution forced a choice, not just for the designers, but for the musicians using these pedals. What's ultimately more valuable for your music, for your creative voice? Is it the sound of the pioneer, that gritty 16-bit character of the RV2, maybe even the RV3, where the limitations themselves almost force you into creative workarounds, giving it a unique vintage digital fingerprint?
The charm of limitations.
Or is it the sound of the flagship? The pristine, high-fidelity, seemingly limitless potential of the RV500, or even the RV6, where the technology gets out of the way and offers almost too much choice, demanding a different kind of discipline from the player.
The character of early digital versus the clarity of modern processing.
Exactly. There's no single right answer, of course, but thinking about which side of that divide you lean towards, the gritty pioneer or the pristine powerhouse, often says a lot about the kind of music you want to make. It's a choice that shapes aesthetics.
That is a fantastic point to end on. Which sonic world do you want to live in? Thanks so much for walking us through that history. Really fascinating stuff.
Welcome, deep divers. Today we're plugging into a really iconic piece of music tech, the Boss RV2 digital reverb.
Ah, yes, the RV.
Little stomp box. It didn't just make noise, it actually kicked off a whole revolution. So we're going to dive deep into its history, the design, its legacy. Our sources today give a fantastic look into its story. Lots of surprises in there.
It's truly fascinating.
Yeah.
Because, when you look at the RV2, now it's from 1987, way back, it might just seem like, oh, another old pedal.
Right, just another box.
But it was so much more. This wasn't just a pedal. It was the very first digital reverb in a compact stomp box form.
The first. Wow.
Yeah, it literally paved the way for pretty much every digital reverb pedals you've seen since. It was that aha moment for musicians.
Yeah.
Getting that studio sound right at their feet.
Absolutely. That's such a key point, isn't it? The first isn't always like perfect, but it changes the game.
Exactly.
And that brings us to our mission today, really. We want to understand how this RV2 pioneered a new sound, what made it so unique, maybe kind of influential, why its production run was actually so short, that's interesting, and ultimately how it sort of spawned this legendary line of pedals that are still shaping music.
The whole family tree, yeah.
It's not just about the gear itself, it's about that moment, that spark of innovation that, well, it echoed for decades. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So let's set the scene first. Picture this. You're a musician. It's before 1987. You want that big, lush, high quality reverb sound.
Right.
What are your options? Well, mostly you're looking at these huge, bulky rack units. Really expensive stuff from Lexicon, Yamaha, Roland.
The big names, yeah. Studio gear.
Exactly. Sounded amazing, sure, but not exactly portable.
Yeah.
And definitely not cheap for your average gigging musician.
No way.
Your other main choice, that classic spring reverb, right? Built into amps, which is cool, but a very different sound. Distinctive.
Totally different vibe.
Yeah.
And that's precisely where the RV2, when it landed in '87, just blew things open. What's fascinating here is it was the first digital reverb pedal squeezed into that standard Boss stomp box size.
Into the little box. Incredible.
Think about what that meant. Suddenly, studio-grade reverb, the kind previously locked away in those pricey racks, it was portable. And, okay, maybe not cheap, but relatively affordable compared to the rack stuff.
Right, accessible.
Boss basically managed to miniaturize the digital signal processing tech from Roland's bigger units. Roland owned Boss, remember, and cram it into their classic pedal.
Yeah.
That wasn't just a small step. It was a total game changer.
Packing that kind of tech in the late 80s into such a small pedal, that must have been a serious engineering challenge. What was actually under the hood making it work?
Oh, absolutely. For a compact pedal then, the tech was pretty impressive. It used 12-bit digital processing.
12-bit, okay.
Yeah, now today we're used to 16-bit, 24-bit, even 32-bit audio, right?
Yeah.
Much more dynamic range. So 12-bit was limited. To get the most out of it, they used this clever technique called companding.
Companding, how does that work?
Well, think of it like this. You compress the audio signal, making quiet bits louder, loud bits quieter before it goes into the digital processing. Then you expand it back out after.
Ah, okay, so you sort of squeeze it through the limited digital space.
Exactly. It effectively squeezed more dynamic range and less noise out of that 12-bit system. Made it sound cleaner than you'd expect. And crucially, it was the first stomp box with true digital algorithm-based reverb.
Algorithm-based, meaning?
Meaning it wasn't just like a simple echo. It was using math, actual algorithms, to simulate acoustic spaces, rooms, halls, plates. That was a real leap in realism for a pedal.
Wow.
Now, here's a quirky thing about it. Very of its time. It used a fair bit of power.
Oh, really?
Yeah, relatively high power consumption. You often needed a specific Boss adapter, the ACA type, or it would just chew through batteries like nobody's business.
Huh. I bet that caused some drama at gigs.
Oh, for sure. Forgetting the power supply.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the trade-off for having that digital magic back then.
So it wasn't just one sound then. It had options. That must have been a big deal for a pedal.
It was huge. It came with 6 different reverb modes, all on a rotary knob.
6. Okay, what were they like?
You had room 1 and room 2 for simulating smaller spaces. Then hall 1 and hall 2 for those bigger, concert hall sounds.
Classic reverb sounds.
Yep. Then plate, emulating those old studio plate reverbs. Great on vocals, drums. And finally, gate.
Ah, the gated reverb.
Yeah.
Very 80s.
Totally. Super popular back then, especially on drums, think Phil Collins. But guitarists used it a lot too. That sound with a reverb just cuts off sharply. Very distinctive, defined a lot of the sound of that era.
So, okay, complex stuff inside, but Boss always makes things user-friendly. What about the controls? Was it easy to dial in?
Oh yeah, classic Boss. Super intuitive. They stuck to their standard 4-knob layout.
Familiar territory.
Exactly. You had the mode knob to pick one of those 6 sounds.
Yeah.
Then balance for your wet drum mix, how much effect versus your clean signal.
Standard mix knob, yep.
A tone knob to make the reverb brighter or darker, shape its character. And of course, reverb time to control how long the decay lasted.
From subtle to huge washes, I guess?
Precisely. Everything you needed right there. Easy to understand. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, the sound itself. Beyond the tech specs, how did the RV2 actually sound? You said 12-bit. Did it sound I don't know, primitive? Or did it have its own thing going on?
It definitely had its own thing. Compared to the super clean, almost transparent digital reverbs we have today, the RV2.
Mm-hmm.
It was more grainy, maybe a bit metallic sometimes.
Grainy and metallic. Okay.
But see, back in '87, that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It kind of became its signature sound. It offered this dense, maybe slightly melancholic texture that was totally new, different from Spring Reverb's splashiness, different from some of the cleaner, maybe colder rack units.
So the imperfection became the character.
Exactly. And that sonic fingerprint was gold for guitarists in genres just starting up, like post-punk, new wave, and especially shoegaze.
Shoegaze. Makes sense.
They used its plate and gate modes, leaned into that grainy texture to build those huge walls of sound, those atmospheric landscapes that define their music. It was darker, moodier than other pedal options.
It's fascinating how limitations can breed creativity like that. Did everyone jump on it right away, or was there some resistance to this new digital sound? And who were some key players using it?
That's a good point about resistance.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, some purists probably stuck to their analog gear.
Yeah.
But the RV2's sound was so new and suddenly so accessible in a pedal, lots of boundary-pushing artists grabbed it.
Yeah. Like who?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you think about Kevin Shields from My Bloody Valentine.
Oh, yeah, the king of wall of sound.
Right. He was famous for using early Boss digital reverbs units like the RV2 that were definitely part of crafting those swirling, iconic textures. Robert Smith of The Cure, too.
The Cure, definitely. Lots of atmosphere there.
Absolutely. In the late 80s, that dense, layered reverb became a huge part of his sound, and the RV2 was perfect for that. Beyond specific names, it just got picked up widely by alternative bands, shoegaze bands, anyone looking for that unique ambience, those specific plate and gate sounds. It really helped shape a whole genre's aesthetic.
Amazing impact. But you mentioned its production run was short. That seems odd for something so groundbreaking. What happened?
Yeah, that's one of the most surprising twists in its story, and it feeds right into why it's so collectible now.
Yeah.
The RV2 was only made from 1987 to 1989.
Just 2 years? Why?
Basically, high manufacturing costs. The digital memory chips needed for that processing. They were incredibly expensive back then.
The cost of innovation.
Exactly. It made the pedal itself expensive to produce and therefore pretty pricey for musicians to buy. So it's this amazing technological step, but commercially, it was a bit challenging in its first form. That economic reality is key to its history.
So, groundbreaking tech, but maybe ahead of its time economically. That short run must make it pretty rare today, right? What's its status among collectors?
This raises an important question. Yeah, its value now is significant. The RV2 is highly collectible, very sought after.
Why specifically? Just the rarity?
Well, partly the rarity, sure. But it's mainly because it holds that title. The first digital reverb in a compact stomp box. That's historically huge.
The pioneer.
Exactly. Collectors value that historical importance just as much as its unique sound. And that sound, that grainy, early digital character, later reverbs got technically better, cleaner, but they didn't sound quite like the RV2. So that sound itself is now part of its charm, part of its legend.
So even though its own life was brief, the RV2 obviously planted a seed. It kicked something off. Let's talk about that legacy. How did it lead to the whole Boss Reverb family we know today?
Oh, the legacy is massive. The RV2 is definitely the acorn that grew into a whole forest of reverb pedals. The first direct successor was the RV3.
The RV3, right. Heard a lot about that one.
Yeah. Came out in 94, made until 2002. Big step because it combined digital reverb and digital delay in one pedal. Super versatile.
2 effects in one box. Smart.
Became a total cult classic, especially with shoegaze again, post-rock, ambient players.
Yeah.
Kevin Shields used this one too. Bands like Explosions in the Sky. It's known for this really spacious, kind of lo-fi, dreamy ambience. Still super sought after.
Okay, so RV3 combined reverb and delay. What came next?
Next up was the RV5, 2002 to 2015. This was back to being a dedicated reverb pedal. 7 modes, had the classics, but the standout new one was modulate mode.
Modulate. What did that do?
It added this subtle, beautiful chorus effect to the reverb tail. Created this swirling, lush texture. Ambient and shoegaze guitarists went absolutely crazy for it. Still incredibly popular, even though it's discontinued.
That sounds lovely. And after the RV5...
Fast forward to 2015, we get the RV6. That's their current compact reverb. Big upgrades here. Stereo inputs and outputs, expression pedal input.
Modern features.
Yep. Updated classic modes, plus new ones like Shimmer and Dynamic. Shimmer, especially that octave up reverb sound, aimed right at modern ambient worship players. Became an instant hit. Just a really solid, versatile pedal overall.
So they kept refining the compact format. What about the high end?
Well, For the absolute top tier, in 2017, they released the RV500 Reverb workstation. This thing is a beast.
A big one.
Yeah, flagship model, high-end multi-algorithm reverb. We're talking 32-bit, 96 kilohertz processing, dual reverb engines you can run simultaneously, deep programmability.
Wow, serious power.
It's got pretty much every classic Boss reverb sound ever, plus advanced stuff like nonlinear, SRV Hall, even better shimmer, MIDI control, presets, complex routing. It's a full-on studio and stage machine. A long way from the RV2.
What an incredible journey. From that first, maybe slightly risky compact digital reverb in '87, all the way to these powerful workstations, alongside updated, affordable compacts. They really covered the whole spectrum. So what does this all mean when you zoom out?
I think what it really means is, well, it shows how a single product,
Right.
even one that wasn't around for long, like the RV2, can spark this huge, lasting evolution.
Yeah.
It proves that sometimes the most influential innovations aren't the perfect ones, or the biggest sellers initially. They're the ones that bravely open a door to something completely new. The RV2 was that first step into a new world of sound for pedals. And even with its flaws and costs, that first step made everything that followed possible for musicians.
That's a great way to put it. The Boss RV2 really does show how sometimes those technical limits or economic hurdles back then, they accidentally created these unique sounds that ended up becoming legendary, right?
Absolutely. Character born from constraint.
It just shows how one bold idea, shrinking studio tech, can just ripple out for decades and shape the music we're still hearing and making.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. It's been fascinating.
A pleasure.
And for you listening, maybe something to think about. How many other things we use every day started out as some kind of expensive, maybe short-lived first attempt? And how often do those early quirks, those imperfections, actually become the things we end up cherishing most about them over time? Something to ponder. Until next time, keep diving deep. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise, grab the insights that matter, and, well, hopefully arm you with stuff that actually sticks. Today, we're diving headfirst into something pretty fascinating, I think. How does a piece of music gear, like a relatively simple digital stomp box, end up defining whole genres? And not just that, but develop this kind of legendary soul, something that lasts way beyond its tech specs, even after it's discontinued. There's definitely a kind of magic to some innovations, especially digital ones sometimes, that goes beyond just the circuitry.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really is the core of our deep dive today. We're getting into the details of the Boss RV5 digital reverb, a compact pedal, sure, but it became this absolute cornerstone for so many guitarists and, carved out a huge place in Boss's history.
So our goal today is to unpack its story, where it came from, the features that were actually pretty innovative back then, and the impact it had culturally that still lasts. We want you to get not just what it did, but why it's still so sought after, why it's this kind of icon in music.
Exactly. Because for a whole generation of players, this little box was like a shortcut. A simple way to get these incredibly lush ambient sounds. It made something complex feel accessible. It's really interesting how one tool can shape creativity like that.
It really is. So, okay, let's start at the beginning then. Where did the RV5 fit in when Boss brought it out in, 2002? It wasn't just pulled out of thin air, right?
Oh, definitely not.
Oh.
It came in as the successor to the RV3. And the RV3, well, that was already kind of a cult favorite itself. It was known for mental reverb and delay, which was cool but different.
Right, the combo pedal.
Exactly. So what's interesting is Boss made a very deliberate shift with the RV5. They decided to go back to a dedicated reverb-only pedal. It wasn't moving backwards, though. It was more like a focused evolution. They saw this growing need, for really high-quality, almost studio-grade reverb, but in a compact pedal format, without the delay part maybe confusing things or taking up processing power. So this let them really hone in on the reverb algorithms, push the quality, aiming for that studio sound on your pedal board. It was all about specializing to get better fidelity.
And clearly that focus worked because, the lifespan of this thing, it stayed in production for 17 years, 2002 all the way to 2019. Only then did the RV6 replace it, that kind of run. It just screams success, doesn't it? Shows how much players liked it.
Absolutely. 17 years for any piece of music tech, especially digital stuff that changes so fast, that's huge.
Yeah.
Monumental, really. It definitely cemented it as one of Boss's most popular digital reverbs ever. But yeah, to get why it was so acclaimed, we kind of need to peel back the layers a bit and look at the tech it brought.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. What was actually inside this little box for the early 2000s? What made it innovative technology-wise?
Right, well, this is where it gets pretty interesting. A really key thing was the 24-bit digital signal processing, the DSP.
Hmm.
Now, you got to remember, a lot of earlier digital effects were maybe 16-bit.
Okay.
So moving to 24-bit was a big leap. It meant much more dynamic range, higher resolution.
Mm.
For the player, that translated into reverbs that sounded smoother, decayed more naturally, less of that
Mm.
slightly grainy or harsh digital artifact sound you sometimes got. It just sounded, well, cleaner, more expensive. A definite step towards studio quality in a pedal.
So not just giving you reverb options, but the quality of the reverb itself was a step up. Less artificial.
Precisely. That level of audio fidelity was a real game changer for a lot of people using pedals. And speaking of expanding the sound, another big deal was the stereo input and output, stereo I/O.
Ah, yeah. How important was that for guitarists getting into those bigger ambient sounds?
Oh, it was huge. If you wanted those wide, spacious effects, stereo was essential. It let you send your signal to amps or direct to a board in stereo and really create this immersive sound field. Suddenly, your reverb could feel massive, truly panoramic, way beyond a simple mono effect. And of course, like pretty much all Boss compacts, it had a buffered bypass.
Right, the buffer. Maybe quickly explain why that matters.
Sure. So a buffered bypass, which is standard for Boss, basically helps keep your guitar signal strong, especially if you have long cables or, a bunch of pedals chained together.
Mhm.
It prevents that tone suck, that loss of high-end sparkle and clarity that can happen. It just ensures your core guitar tone stays intact through the chain.
Okay, got it. So we've got better processing stereo capability, but the real magic, I guess, where the tech meets the sound was in the modes, right? 8 different reverb types. That's a lot of variety.
Absolutely. That palette of sounds was really where the RV5 shone. It wasn't just innovative tech, it offered really diverse sonic options. And yeah, it had the essentials covered really well. You had Spring, which did a pretty convincing job of mimicking those drippy, splashy reverb tanks in old amps.
The classic amp reverb sounds.
Exactly. Then Plate, which is known for that bright, smooth, really dense sound you hear on lots of studio recordings, especially vocals, very hi-fi. Hall gave you those really large cavernous spaces, perfect for epic sounds, big swells. And Room was for smaller, more natural-sounding ambience, good for adding just a bit of space without washing everything out. So those 4 gave you a really solid foundation.
Covers the basics beautifully, but it didn't just do the basics, did it? This is where it started getting kind of creative and maybe a bit weird. What were the modes that really stood out as different?
Yeah, this is where the RV5 really carved its niche. The gate mode, for example, that was kind of a curveball. It gives you that really short, chopped-off reverb tail, famously used on 80s drums.
Yeah, that gated snare sound.
Right. But guitarists, especially in post-punk and stuff, found cool uses for it, added this sharp, rhythmic kind of quality, showed it wasn't just for smooth ambience. Then you had the plus delay mode. Yeah, that was a smart move, kind of a nod back to the RV3.
Ah, bringing back some of that combo functionality.
Exactly. It layered a simple delay with the reverb. So you got 2 key effects in one mode, which obviously appealed to people who like the RV3 or just wanted that combo.
And the dynamic mode seems like a really clever idea specifically for guitar players, letting the reverb bloom but keeping the notes clear.
It was brilliant, honestly. Dynamic mode is basically a ducking reverb. What that means is the reverb level drops or ducks when you're playing and then swells back up in the pauses between notes or chords. So you could have this really lush, continuous reverb wash going on, but your actual playing, your attack, wouldn't get buried or muddied by it. The notes punch through clearly.
That's super useful. Avoids the sonic mud.
Totally. Great for lead lines where you want sustain and space, but also clarity.
Okay, but we've saved the superstar for last, haven't we? If there's one mode that just became legendary, the reason so many people still talk about the RV5, it has to be modulate, right?
Oh, absolutely. No question. The modular mode is like the cornerstone of the RV5's whole legacy. What it does is add this gentle, sort of swirling chorus effect to the reverb tails. It creates this incredibly rich, ethereal, almost shimmering texture. It's hard to describe perfectly, but it just sounds beautiful.
It wasn't just a technical thing, it became a sound.
Exactly. It wasn't just reverb with modulation added. There was something about the way the RV5 did it. It felt organic, alive. They gave the sound this movement and depth. And yeah, it instantly became the sound for shoegaze players, ambient artists. It almost defined that dreamy, swirling guitar sound for a whole generation.
So thinking about the overall tone and the signature sounds, it all comes back to modulate. That lush sound is still what people chase. But it wasn't just about modulate, was it?
Definitely not. Modulate achieved that kind of mythical status for sure. Synonymous with shoegaze, ambient, post-rock. But you're right, it wasn't a one-trick pony. Those Plate and Hall algorithms we mentioned, they were really clean, very hi-fi sounding. They were genuinely useful in the studio for getting professional sounding reverb, and they worked great live too, so it had that workhorse quality as well.
And you mentioned the dynamic mode again, that ability to kind of have your cake and eat it too, the big space and the clear attack.
Exactly. That clarity within the ambience was a huge plus. It meant you could dial in a really deep, swirling reverb sound, but the actual notes you played still had punch and definition. They didn't just dissolve into a wash, which can happen easily with some reverbs. It kept things articulate, even when things got dense.
It's fascinating to think how this one pedal fits into the bigger picture. If we zoom out a bit, how does the RV5 sit in the history of Boss reverb pedals? What was the timeline there?
Right, looking at the lineage is helpful. Boss were really pioneers in compact digital reverb. The first one ever was the RV2, way back in 1987. That was groundbreaking digital studio reverb in a little pedal. Then, as we said, the RV3 came in 94. That cult classic reverb plus delay combo. Really versatile.
Okay.
Then comes our main subject, the RV5, running from 2002 to 2019. The dedicated reverb icon, known for those 8 modes, the 24-bit sound, stereo, and especially modulate. By the time it came out, yeah, there were other digital options starting to appear, but Boss had that combination of like road-ready build quality being available everywhere and these really refined sounds, especially modulate, at a price that wasn't crazy boutique level.
So it hit a sweet spot of quality and accessibility.
Pretty much. Then its successor, the RV6, came out in 2015 and is still around. It brought updated algorithms, a dedicated shimmer mode, which clearly takes inspiration from modulated reverb plus expression pedal control, pushing things further. And then for the real deep divers, Boss released the RV500 workstation in 2017. Massive programmability, tons of options.
So with all these newer pedals, like the RD6 being technically better maybe, and the RV500 being way more powerful, why does the RV5 still have this hold? Why isn't it just, old news?
That's such a great question, and it gets back to that whole idea of a pedal having a soul, doesn't it? Despite the RV6 having, on paper, improved tech, or the RV500 having endless options or countless boutique pedals doing amazing things now, the RV5 is still super sought after. There's just something about its specific sound, particularly that modulate mode. For many players, newer pedals, even if technically superior, just don't quite capture that specific vibe in the same way. It's almost like the specific character of its early 2000s digital processing. Maybe the slight imperfections gave it this, intangible quality, a warmth maybe, that sometimes gets lost in newer, cleaner designs.
Which leads us perfectly into its cultural impact, its legacy. Because it's not just about the tech specs, is it? It's about the music it helped create, the artists who used it.
Absolutely. And the influence on specific artists and genres is undeniable.
Right.
You mentioned Kevin Shields of My Bloody Valentine earlier. He was famous for using Boss gear. And that RV5 modulate sound became, well, a key ingredient in his whole glide guitar approach. Those massive swirling textures owe a lot to it.
Wow, okay.
Then you have bands like Explosions in the Sky. They're practically the definition of post-rock for many people, and they leaned heavily on the RV5's modulate and hall modes to build those signature atmospheric landscapes. Epic, but also really intimate feeling.
And it wasn't just these big influential names, right? It became kind of standard gear for certain styles.
Totally. It became a genuine staple. Like if you were playing shoegaze, post-rock, or even a lot of contemporary worship guitar music through the 2000s, 2010s, the RV5 was almost required equipment. Those unique modulated textures, that lushness. It was just the perfect tool for achieving those expansive emotional sounds. It was the sound people were hearing in their heads.
So it really was everywhere, not just on niche pedal boards.
Oh yeah. You could argue it was probably the most popular compact reverb pedal of its era. You'd see it on countless pedal boards across tons of different genres, which again speaks to its versatility and just how well it worked for people. That 17-year run proves it wasn't a flash in the pan. And that modulate mode specifically. It became so iconic that it clearly inspired a whole wave of shimmer reverb pedals and other modulation-heavy reverbs from boutique builders later on. It really set a trend.
And people are still buying them today on the used market.
Absolutely. The demand for used RV5s is still really strong. Which leads to this interesting point you hear musicians debate, this idea of it being warmer. You genuinely hear players say they prefer the RV5, finding it warmer or more musical than the technically more advanced RV6. And that just highlights how much subjective feel and sonic character matter in music gear. It's not always about the specs on paper. It's about the vibe, the connection, that soul we talked about.
What a story for a little stomp box. Okay, so just to quickly wrap the key things up, the Boss RV5, Made from 2002 to 2019, really was a landmark pedal. It gave players 8 high-quality reverb algorithms, had that hi-fi 24-bit sound, crucial stereo I/O, but mostly it's remembered and loved for that legendary modulate mode. That made it the go-to for ambient post-rock shoegaze worship. Anyone chasing those lush, ethereal textures. Even though it's discontinued, its reputation as one of the all-time great compact reverbs is totally solid. It offered a path to a sound and ended up defining it.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes you think, right? What does it really tell us when a piece of digital tech from, decades ago is still so revered, sometimes even preferred over newer, technically better gear? Is it just nostalgia? Or is it something about that perceived warmth, that specific sonic fingerprint it left on so much music? Or maybe it's something deeper, like an emotional connection artists form, with the tools that really help them find their voice. As you think about the RV5, maybe consider how just one feature like that modulate mode can do more than just sound good. It can inspire whole genres and keep sparking ideas for musicians years and years later. It shows that maybe the real magic isn't just in the code, but in how it connects with creativity.